OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
7:30 on this Tuesday morning. You're welcome along to OTB AM. It's Eoin and Aisling with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And it is another massive day for the Republic of Ireland football teams. We've got the Under-21s, we've got the seniors in action. We'll have plenty of build-up on the show over the next couple of hours to those games. We'll also be looking ahead to All-Ireland quarter-finals weekend in the hurling. No better man than Tommy Walsh to help us do that, so he'll be with us a little bit later on. And we'll also be speaking to Tyrone's Niall Morgan to reflect on their season over the last couple of months. There's also some Formula 1 coming your way with Shane Hannon in a little while, so we've got plenty coming your way between now and 10. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to drop us a tweet at Off The Ball, or you can leave a YouTube comment as well if that's where you're getting us. Aisling, a very good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, Owen. All good now, not too bad. How are you?
Very well. You were one of the lucky ones. They were discussing it on the show last night about this attendance figure at Croke Park on Saturday. How many people really went through the turnstiles, because it seemed to be a figure that they weren't publicising too much. It didn't look like a lot, but Colm Keys in the Irish Independent this morning has the exact figure. We should get a drum roll for this. The exact figure for the Croke Park doubleheader on Saturday was 16,425, and you were one of those 16,400. Wow. Well, they don't count the media, so maybe a little bit more than that.
There's a few more then. I'm not surprised by that figure. That's extremely low, but I'm really not surprised at all. I was in for the boat games and I got in there early enough, maybe an hour and a half before the first game. And even driving in, I was thinking to myself, is there even any games on? Like, there was nobody about. Right. You know, you've seen the few fans trickling in, but nothing major to think of. A double header, qualifiers, you know, massive occasion in our game. Like in the GA games, this is one of the, you know, the biggest games as you're coming up into the semi-finals, finals, all of that. So you're thinking these are massive games, and there was not many fans around at all, not really much of a buzz. And I got parked grand, and in I went. And even when the teams first ran out, I think Clare ran out first, and it was almost like a dead silence. They obviously played the music out over the speakers, so that obviously helped. But you know, there was, it looked like nobody whatsoever. Obviously, I can't see down into the Hogan stand too clear where you are in the media box, but it just looked so empty, really dead. And I just thought to myself, this is crazy. This is crazy. This game is here. Like, these lads running out into this massive occasion, and it just felt like so underwhelming. It was the same then for when Roscommon came out, and even Mossy Quinn was alongside me, and he got in a little bit later. He was a bit panicked getting there just a little bit later than he wanted to, and he said, geez, I got parked on Clonliffe Road, like, no bother.
Right.
I was like, what? Like, normally that's closed off. Didn't even need to be closed off, and he got parked. Okay. So that really just shows you.
So they actually knew that it wasn't going to be a big deal, really. The
they obviously had an idea. Weren't. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was just, yes, it's sad to see, because that's one of our biggest games, isn't it? Like, it really, you know, within the game, that is one of it should be the biggest games we should be so excited about. And when I heard the games were in Croke Park, I was really not that excited for the games, because I knew exactly what it was going to be like, and it was.
Yeah. Do you prefer working at games that are like down the country and provincial grounds, like compared to that sort of cavernous thing?
I love when the games aren't in Croke Park. Like, obviously I love getting into Croke Park. It's brilliant, you know, when the atmosphere is full, and, you know, semi-finals, All-Ireland's amazing. You know, it really is amazing. Like, I'm not dissing Croke Park, but just personally, when you get to the likes of Clones or the Athletic Grounds, like, there's nothing beats that buzz. Yeah. And definitely the players have to feed off that. And even in the boat games in the doubleheader at the weekend, there were both bad starts. Like, the balls were dropping short, there was misplaced passes, it was just no intensity, it was just going through the motions. And I was like, if this was, you know, in a smaller ground, you definitely would feed off the crowd. And I think, you know, you would have got probably a better. It was a great game towards the end in both games, but I think a full game of like both halves being full intensity. Yeah, that's interesting, because I was like making the point in the show yesterday that as a television spectacle, I didn't think it was bad, because I just am so used to turning on football games and they being pretty bad. And it's just like in terms of like a competitive imbalance in a lot of the provincial games. And this was like, you talk about it as like one of the bigger games of the season. Like this, for me, it felt like weekend one of the football championship. And I guess you have this kind of cloud over it that maybe it wasn't utilised in the best way possible. And I guess even from a commercial standpoint,
do you get more than 16,000 people if it's at a ground that's closer to the western seaboard? Like, I mean, you possibly do. I'd say you probably do.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say, like, I mean, we've made this point as well, that there is obviously commitments to people who've got premium level tickets and all that in Croke Park, but to play round 2 qualifiers as it was in this year's situation, it's probably a bit of a stretch for that stadium. Like, and Mick was making the point last night that you have this iconic late score from Clare to win the game against Roscommon, and it's into an empty stand with advertising there. I hadn't really thought about it that way either, that even from a television standpoint that does kind of ruin it. I'd kind of like taken the Croke Park thing and compartmentalised it, and I was like, well, this conclusion to Clare Roscommon is amazing, and this Mayo Kildare game may not be unbelievable quality wise, but it's chaotic and brilliant, and I'd kind of parked all that. But the more I've kind of like listened to people who are there talk about it a little bit more, I'm like, God, this could have been so much better. We really could be on a high right now. Kind of like the hurling folk are on a high after a good day in Thurles or something like that.
Yeah, like, because I'm coming off the back of Clonus for you know the Ulster final, and obviously seeing those scenes. And then you look at the qualifiers, which should be massive games for Clare, like first time hoping to get their win. And I don't know, we were trying to figure it out. I think prior to 92, it was 75 years prior to 92 that they had got their first win. It should be such a big occasion.
Yeah.
And obviously you have the problem at the minute with hotel rooms, hotel prices, all of that comes down to it as well. People aren't travelling for that reason. You've even diesel, petrol prices, all these things that people are like, I can't do it. You know, all of these things do feed into it. And there were great finishes to the game, even in the Mayo game, the goal at the end. You know, there was great moments in the game, but I just feel if we were elsewhere, closer to maybe, as you said, the western area, that it might have been, you know, better games, better atmosphere, and you'd walk away thinking, like, if this was a different sport and we were in the qualifiers, AFL, like, would we see this amount of people at the games? Like, I feel like no chance. But I just feel it was just done wrong. Yeah,
it's interesting because also in that piece in The Independent this morning, it says it is understood that tentative discussions were had to explore if Dublin and Cork would enter a home and away agreement, with Páirc Uí Chaoimh hosting their All-Ireland quarter-final. However, agreement could not be reached as Parnell Park is considered Dublin's home venue and consequently would be deemed unsuitable for a championship match involving Dublin. I mean,
is it though?
We not just accept at this point that like Croke Park can masquerade as Dublin's home venue. If you want to say it's pretending, it's like catfishing us and pretending that it's Dublin's home venue, we can all get over it.
Yeah.
But like it is. That's what it is. That's what Croke Park is. It's interesting that was looked into though, that Dublin and Cork could potentially enter that home and away agreement. That playing these games in Croke Park is not a hard and fast thing that the GAA have, but they were willing to make an exception, or it seemed anyway, for Cork because they've got a massive stadium as well. I just don't understand why they can't make an exception for all the other fixtures as well. Why does it have to be the two biggest population bases that they make the exception for? Like, is Clare Roscommon not a fixture as worthy of having the best venue possible as Cork versus Dublin is?
Of course it is, yeah. I think after this now and hearing that there's 16,000 odd fans, like, they have to look at it. They have to see it's not working. You do have to look at it the side of the players as well. I chatted to Ger about this last week, and you know, it is a big moment for the players, especially for the Clare players to go out on Croke Park. So I get that too, I do, and we have to think of the players obviously, but would they rather have won that game by a point in the way they won it in a packed out stadium elsewhere that it was full of atmosphere? I'm sure they would have.
But Roscommon got lulled into a false sense of security because Croke Park was so quiet, and ultimately that's what allowed Clare to come in and get their famous win. Got a great question for you from Conor McMahon, who's been in touch. Who has the best chance of doing the double? Clare, Cork or Galway?
Oh.
I mean, that's...
With Clare at the minute, it's brilliant to see, isn't it? Jeez.
You put Clare ahead of Galway in terms of doing the double?
Hold on a minute. Jeez, I need to think.
It's Galway, isn't it? It's...
football wise, I wouldn't fully be back in Galway. To be honest.
Would you be backing Armagh against them the next day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Would you?
I probably would, to be honest, but I would be more uncertain about that than I would be about the Clare Derry game. For example, I think that Derry will beat Clare. Not 100% sure of that. I think that's the Ulster final. I mean, they would have been on such a high, but I think they'll beat Clare in that.
I think
Cork,
so.
We're just concluding here that Cork are the least likely. That's what we want to do. That's what
it's between Clare and Galway.
That's what Conor wants us to say this morning. Cork, the least likely of those three.
That's a hard one, but it's great to see Galway, Clare in both, you know, hurling and football now doing so well. it's great to see. But that is a tough question.
Dave Cos says, I hope the GAA lost bank by holding that disgraceful doubleheader. Like, I think it maybe opens up a conversation not just on those qualifiers but also on quarter-final weekend, and I think that is a genuine debate. I can absolutely see why people say last date Croke Park. I'd like to see it just tried out one year. What would happen if quarter-final weekend took place somewhere else? Now, next year you'll obviously have a new situation where you'll have seeds going into the knockout stages from groups in the new format for the All-Ireland Championship. So I think there'll be a lot more home advantage, or at least I hope that's what's implemented next year. So maybe next year it is sorted out a little bit. But if we ever go back to like an All-Ireland quarter-final scenario, what would that look like in a place not called Croke Park? I think that'd look great, as 2001 showed us in Thurles for that replay between for the double header, I should say, between Kerry and Dublin. Right, we've got plenty more to get into over the next little while. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. As you can see, plenty coming up over the next little while. Formula 1 latest with Shane in just a few minutes. Tommy Walsh will be with us at 8:10 to look ahead to those All-Ireland Hurling quarter-finals. The sports news with John Duggan coming your way at 8:25. Then Niall Morgan of Tyrone will be with us at 10:09. Phil Egan looking ahead to tonight's game in Poland against Ukraine, and Dion Fanning on last night's show at 9:30. Just one other thing we wanted to touch on this morning, Aisling, is the constant drumbeat of players leaving Ireland to go to Australia, particularly the AFLW over the last little while has kind of ratcheted up over the last few weeks. Pre-season starts this month in Australia. That has been a real, not a point of contention, but it's been a point, I'd say it's had red flags waving in a few counties that all of a sudden the AFLW season and the GEA season, the LGFA season overlap significantly. What you have now is Orla Lally of Meath, who's going to be the second Meath player, isn't it, after Vicky Wall to go down to Australia. That's not going to have an impact on me, obviously, this season, but it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next little while. So they're not going to depart. Wall and Lally are both going to stay until their championship campaign is at an end. But they have been working with an AFLW skills coach, and they've been doing bits on the side. It's just really interesting to see how this will develop over the next little while, because there's a bit of a choice that's going to have to be taken, just like the men had to take from the very start when this thing came in, and that's going to be on the table for a lot of these players, it seems.
Yeah, it's great that the two girls get to wait until after the championship, because that hasn't been the case for a lot of the girls that are going out to play. The likes of Eric O'Shea, they're all heading out a lot earlier. So it's great in that sense. But hearing the news this morning about Orla Lally, I said, whoa, that's such a blow now for me to have two really influential players, to lose them to your squad. So I'm sure that the Meath management, the Meath girls are devastated that they're losing them, but at the same time really positive for the girls. Look, to get a chance to play in a professional setup, is just something that we didn't dream of happening, a few years ago, and it's great to see those opportunities for women's players nowadays. But it'll be interesting to see, because I think it's only growing more and more. The game's getting bigger and bigger each year out there, so I think there's going to be a lot more players that will go. Hopefully they can sort out maybe the schedule, and it's only coming in this year, as you said, that it's a lot earlier. So I think it will have an effect probably as the years go on, if it sticks to that scheduling, because I think it's an exception this year that Vicky and Orla are going out maybe that bit later. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Yeah,
it certainly seems to me that if you're in a professional environment and you've been given a little bit of your arrival has been postponed, and you're in that professional environment, I think next year, if a team wants to achieve better things than they did this year, they'll be like, okay, everybody needs to be back by such and such a time, and all of a sudden then the LGFA might have a bit of a problem on their hands with significant players leaving earlier.
I think so. Like the likes of Collingwood, I was just seeing a few things online yesterday. They're back full into their pre-season training, and obviously you get to Australia, you have to adapt to it all, so it takes a little bit of time. So for sure, I think players are going to go out probably even earlier next year. I think actually that they hadn't come up with the schedule for it. Everyone was waiting for quite a time to see when it was actually going to be, so that's actually why a lot of the players even went out later. So I think it could be even sooner next year. But it's a massive blow. Even our club championship draw was done last night, and I think there's a lot of people that are here, and the likes of Orla Lally and that are going to Australia and are going to be pretty happy now.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Just because she's such a phenomenal player, unbelievable. So when you see her at club level too, she's just immense. The same with Vicky Wall. But a great opportunity for them, but such a massive loss. And I think as a whole within the game, we'll probably see more and more players go out. But hopefully they return too, and they they're even better when they come back from that professional environment. I suppose that's all you really hope for.
Yeah, I wonder what Eamon Murray has to say about another player going to watch the sport with no skill at all. He wasn't overly impressed with Monaghan at the weekend, just reading some of his quotes. Meath conceded 1 point at the weekend, which I think probably illustrates how good Meath are defensively as well as in attack, but also I think about Monaghan's ambition. At least if you're looking at Eamon Murray's comments, he said Monaghan had 15 players behind the ball, and only for Stacey and the freeze it was awful to watch, and that was him putting the boot in on Monaghan and their kind of approach to the game at the weekend. Like this could obviously next season be something that disrupts Meath, but this year I know Dublin are back and angrier than ever, but do you still make them favourites for this year's All-Ireland?
It's a tough one this year now, because you see Dublin, you see the players that they have coming into the squad. The likes of Carla Rowe didn't even play in that Leinster final. So when I seen her in her tracksuit on the sideline, and then Meath were pretty much at full squad, I'm trying to think, pretty much, yeah. So, you know, you see the likes of her, the influence she has, and she wasn't even playing. So, yeah, it's a tough one. As you said, they're definitely back angrier than ever. And I think Mick Bowen was sort of caught on the hop a little bit last year, in that he hadn't did his homework, but remember that press conference before the All-Ireland final last year, and he sort of had mentioned that, you know, he didn't know a lot of the players, and I don't think he fully knew a lot about Meath. Maybe, obviously he hadn't played against them, so he didn't know what to expect, and yeah. So I think he's a lot more prepared this year, but you'd never write Meath off. Like, they're a phenomenal team. They're so exciting, so enjoyable to watch them.
Yeah.
Like, I love the way they play. It really is so enjoyable. But it's great to see that rivalry. Like, we really needed it in Meath football as well, just to have that, even that Leinster rivalry. But yeah, I think it's touch and go between them two. Donegal are doing well this year as well. They have a few players back. So they'll be up thereabouts. Armagh doing well, but I do think it'll be back between Meath and Dublin once again.
Yeah, it's a hell of a rivalry that seems to be developing there. Even it's got the potential to get to that Dublin Cork level over the last couple of years with the players that we're seeing on both sides. But it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next couple of years as well. If this AFLW thing becomes more stringent in terms of players coming out earlier, and these players are getting a taste of combining both sports, so it's in many ways even more appetising for them than some of the men who turn it down without having ever gone over there to sample it. A lot of these women have gone down there, sampled it, and is like, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
And as Patrick McHugh says, who's been in touch on the YouTube comments, I live in Perth and watch AFL. I totally support Irish sports people coming out there and making a career for themselves. Everything about it is excellent, apart from the homesickness, obviously, and you can just see that in the players who are going down there, succeeding, loving the life and staying down there. So we'll keep an eye on that over the next little while. It is 7:48. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Shane Hannon, a very good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, guys. How are things?
Yeah, very well. We didn't really touch on the Formula 1 at all over the last couple of days. It was a busy sports weekend. We are in the middle of Baku and Canada week. So give us a top line from Baku, first of all.
Yeah, top line from Baku. It's hard to believe, actually, we're just over 1/3 of the way through the season now. So it's kind of flown by, the first 8 races, it has to be said. But yeah, a lot of excitement in Baku. And I guess the top line is Max Verstappen. A familiar top line. We're used to him being kind of that side of the grid, but he had a very, very good day all around. Like, when you think about the leaderboard after, I think it was Australia, after race 3, like, Charles Leclerc had such a commanding lead over the rest of the field, and you're starting to think, this is Ferrari's year. Leclerc is doing well. Carlos Sainz is an excellent number 2 driver for Ferrari as well. Like, he was 46 points ahead, was Charles Leclerc, over Verstappen after that Australian Grand Prix. He's now slipped to 34 points adrift of Max. So that's an average loss of 16 points per race since that Australian Grand Prix. So all of a sudden, you just kind of see how quickly Formula 1 can turn on its head and the lead can slip to someone else. But yeah, I mean, Max had a fairly good weekend. His pace was so strong, in fact, in Baku at the weekend on Sunday, guys, that the team radio were basically telling him to slow down and decrease his pace. To kind of save wear and tear in the car and on the tyres as well. He did oblige and he did slow down, but his lead still increased over his teammate Sergio Perez to eventually win the race by more than 20 seconds. So kind of shows how dominant he is. He's now won 5 of the 8 races so far this season. And if we're being honest, as much as we want a Drivers' Championship battle like we had last year, he looks the far superior driver at the minute in the far superior car.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Is there a sense that maybe at the start of the season the Ferrari brand was kind of front and centre, and people were like, right, we're harking back to the great old days of Formula One here, where they will be contending, and absolutely there's every chance that Leclerc will be in the winner's enclosure at the end of this whole season. Was there a little bit of that, Shane, and maybe people didn't realise just how much Red Bull had to get their act together and how quickly they were capable of doing that?
Yeah, I guess there was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of the nostalgia, the seeing the red livery on the car, the prancing horse. Everyone got a bit excited seeing a Ferrari car all of a sudden back competing again for races and for, you would hope, championships as well, to make it a little bit more interesting. But and that's not to say that Red Bull haven't had their issues. Like Max hasn't been too happy with some of the oversteering on his car, which has kind of taken some of the pace away from him. But and then he's had that battle with Sergio Perez, which you can turn into a positive or a negative. They had issues in Spain that Conor sketches so effortlessly turned into a meme, where Perez basically has to let Max through, and doesn't like doing that. They are teammates at the end of the day, but that's the joy of Formula One. That they're also number one rivals. That the guy you're in the same car as is the person you want to impress against the most. But the Ferrari thing is fascinating, because as I said, that start to the season, you're thinking, yeah, this is Charles Leclerc's year. The thing I'd be worried about, guys, with them and with Charles Leclerc particularly, he's had 6 poles. So of the 8 races this year, he's been on pole position after qualifying 6 times. He's only converted 2 of those into wins. So seems to be an excellent driver on the Saturday in qualifying, and then whatever happens on the Sunday, it just goes to pot, really. As soon as the race happens, whether it's Red Bull's race strategy, whether it's these Ferrari power unit and engine problems that seem to have kicked in, it's hard to know what the issue is. Like, you look at Baku at the weekend, and Leclerc retiring from the race after 20 laps, a power unit related issue. Carlos Sainz in the same car had to retire 11 laps earlier, and that seemed to be a hydraulics issue in the car. But it's not just those Ferrari cars. Ferrari also work on the engines and provide the engines for some other teams. Kevin Magnussen's Haas being one of them, which suffered an engine-related issue on Sunday as well. And then the Alfa Romeo of Zhou Guanyu also had issues on Sunday. And again, that's a Ferrari-provided engine. So all of a sudden, you're looking at the power units of Ferrari and thinking, something's not quite right there.
Couple of comments to put to you, Shane. Ricky Lowe says, Max opted for a race setup instead of a qualifying setup. Looking back at it now, it was a brilliant plan. And then John Claffey kind of touches on a theme that's definitely been spoken about over the last little while. He says, it's such a Formula One thing to do after such a brilliant year last year. They changed the rules for the cars, and now Max is going to run away with it. There won't be a championship for the last 8 races. Is that on the money, or are we kind of maybe overlooking maybe the way Mercedes have shot themselves in the foot a little bit themselves this season, or can they just blame that on the new setup and the new regulations this year?
Like, to an extent, they can certainly blame the regulations, but and you look at, when things are going wrong, it's very easy to look at the regulation changes and say, okay, yeah, that's not really gone our way. Like some of the great quotes from Christian Horner, even after the weekend, he's talking about the fact that Mercedes are complaining about these porpoising issues on the car. Other teams maybe aren't complaining as much. Certainly Red Bull aren't complaining as much because they're clearly dealing with it. But certainly you have to look at the rule regulation changes. Like, they have a difficult job, the FIA, every year. The issues with the final race last year and Lewis and Max's battle and what should and should not have been done in letting Max pass the cars in front of him. Like they really can't win, the FIA. But yeah, certainly the rule changes this year seem to have gone in the favour of Red Bull, and for the early part of the season, Ferrari clearly, and their power unit was something that was actually working quite well. That's the funny thing now, because Red Bull were asked about these stricken Ferrari cars after the race on Sunday, and Verstappen emphasised with Charles Leclerc and said, look, he had a similar pattern of engine problems in the first 3 races of the season, but his quote was, shit happens, that's racing. So he didn't have a magnitude of sympathy for his Ferrari teammate or his Ferrari colleagues, as you would imagine. So yeah, look, the commenters are quite right. The rule changes have certainly gone in some particular teams' favours, but as we've seen with the swing since race 3 to the leaderboard now, anything can happen. So it's not all over yet.
Yeah, I had seen that Red Bull, they were suspicious about Mercedes, that they're making a bigger issue out of it. And Lewis Hamilton, he actually looked to be struggling to get out of his car at the end of the race.
Like that is, and actually that's a fair point, because to see a Formula One driver getting out of the car in the way in which, like, Lewis Hamilton is a man who loves a little bit of drama potentially anyway, but it's hard not to feel sympathy for him when you see him getting out of the car like an old man after the race in Baku. And like a lot of kind of Formula One fans laughing online saying, oh, look at the head of him getting out of that car. But it's a serious issue, because this porpoising, I mean, you talk about the dangers of mini concussions in sports like the NFL. Like Pierre Gasly, I think, was talking about the fact that he's concerned about these drivers having to use walking sticks by the time they're in their early to mid 30s because of these issues. And this porpoising issue, for anyone who isn't familiar, it's essentially aerodynamic issues that sees these cars bounce at the high speeds. So a lot of people will have seen it on the straights. You kind of have those wonderful slow-mo videos online during the races and during qualifying where you can quite clearly see the cars bouncing. And you're dead right, Ashton. Like, Mercedes have been the team that have quite clearly struggled with that the most. George Russell is part of the Grand Prix drivers directorate as well, and he's talked about it from a safety perspective. He's actually been one of the most vocal voices talking about how dangerous it is. And really, when you see people like Lewis Hamilton struggling, and look, it has been getting worse. Like Toto Wolff, I'm just seeing a quote here in front of me from Toto Wolff after the race on Sunday, and he's saying Lewis is really bad. You can see this is not muscular anymore. It goes properly into the spine, and it can have some consequence. The solution could be to have someone in reserve, which we anyway have in every race. He was talking about Lewis Hamilton potentially not taking part in the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. That's how bad his back problems were, and having drivers ready to go. And Stoffel Van Dorn, I think, and Nick de Vries are their two reserve drivers. But yeah, this porpoising issue seemed to bleed into the rest of the drivers' grid after Sunday. So clearly it's an issue that's not going away.
And why, if for people that don't know, why is it worse for some cars than others? Like, if some cars just getting it right?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. And this is why some teams and team principals maybe don't have sympathy for Mercedes. So this effort to get porpoising brought out of the sport, there's a certain level at which cars can be off the road in terms of the chassis touching the track underneath. Mercedes is quite low, even in comparison to Red Bull. So they're essentially sacrificing a little. They could bring the car a little bit higher, which would make the porpoising a little less dramatic, but that would sacrifice team performance. Now, this is what Christian Horner is saying. He's saying Mercedes can't really complain, because when they are capable of lifting the car even ever so slightly and making it a little bit safer for their drivers, then they can't really complain. Like, he's talking about these calls for a rule change for Mercedes, and saying they're only causing a scene because their car has been so troublesome. He's saying the easiest thing is to raise a car. He was talking about you should never run a car that's unsafe, and he says that's more for the FIA's technical guys. There are certain cars that have more serious issues, Mercedes being two of them, and he thinks it's unfair to penalise the cars that have done a decent job with these porpoising regulations versus the ones that have maybe missed the target. And he's talking about Mercedes there. But if you look at it, like, Daniel Ricciardo is another driver who had these issues on at the weekend, and he was talking about the general health. He said he never really understood all the drama behind Mercedes' complaints about porpoising in the previous few races. But after Sunday, you saw Daniel Ricciardo bouncing around in his McLaren car as well. He says it's got worse and worse, and he sympathises now with everyone. He said after the race he felt rattled. Not good for our general health and well-being was another quote that stood out. And he was quite clearly shaken. He spoke at one point about feeling like someone who'd been dribbled down a court by Steph Curry. And clearly these guys' heads are getting shaken. So you have some sympathy for Mercedes, but maybe they have to try raising the car, as Christian Horner said, before really regulation changes come into effect.
I mean, he would say that, and he would love that. He would love nothing more than for Mercedes to just get a little bit slower, right? And this is a really interesting sort of dilemma that these teams are in, that Mercedes and McLaren are both in, that do you sacrifice speed for the sake of driver welfare? Like, Lewis Hamilton doesn't strike me as the type of guy who's going to over-egg the back pain. He's like one of the best competitors in the sport's history. I mean, hiding pain is something that a lot of competitors do. This is obviously a pretty bad scenario that he's in, same with Ricciardo. And the teams have the power, Shane, to stop this immediately, but it would obviously mean sacrificing their capabilities of going out and trying to stop Red Bull this weekend.
100%. And like, you also need to point out the fact that at the end of the day on Sunday in Baku in Azerbaijan, like George Russell finished in third, so he got a podium. Lewis Hamilton finished fourth, and that's not been a result that he's been kind of capable of getting so far this year. So the fact that they were third and fourth on the grid at the end of the race, and still having all these issues, highlights that they still have a little bit of speed. Certainly not the speed of Red Bull, and when the Ferrari cars' engines managed to finish the race, certainly not as fast as them either. But they can't really complain. Like, apparently the drivers by the end of this weekend, in those drivers debrief meetings, 19 of the 20 drivers were reportedly on board with having these regulation changes, and that could mean anything really. That's down to the technical engineers in order to kind of change the cars to address this porpoising issue. But Fernando Alonso appears to be the only exception,
right,
in terms of drivers.
Well, I was going to ask, like, who do we know who the guy is? Why does he not support his comrades?
Well, it doesn't really make sense, and I'm not quite sure why.
He's an old man as well. He's got the worst back of the lot, surely.
This is the thing. He's the old man. He's the grandfather of the grid, so you'd imagine he would have the biggest issues. Maybe perhaps he's thinking the damage is already done to me. Been there, done that, had a long career. So it could be it. But like, when you see him not complaining about the issues and saying, it's grand, let's not change the regulations right now. But then his Alpine teammate, Esteban Ocon, is one of the other 19 drivers who is complaining, and he's in the same car as Fernando Alonso. So, like, it probably does need to change when you have 19 out of 20 drivers. Maybe they're waiting until they get the 20 out of 20 and they have the full support of the drivers' grid before they change. But I feel like something has to change. As soon as drivers start talking about driver safety, and Lewis Hamilton was making the point as well, guys, that he's traveling down a straight at ridiculous speeds. You're touching 200 miles per hour and at points. If he manages he was struggling at that point to keep the car on the grid. The porpoising and bouncing was so bad that at that speed he could quite easily have gone off and crashed into a pit wall, crashed into the side walls, and that would have been dangerous. And as soon as drivers start mentioning safety, and Daniel Ricciardo was another that did it, I guess the FIA have to stand up and take notice. So Christian Horner can laugh at Mercedes all he wants, and of course he wants their pace to go slower. But
his drivers, like, obviously his drivers want change, but Christian Horner doesn't want change. Is that what we're seeing here?
Yeah, and it's a little bit of politics as well. Like, I think Horner is of the opinion that it's easy for Mercedes to complain, but he's always going to disagree with what Toto Wolff says. Like, anyone who's watched Drive to Survive knows that Horner and Wolff probably legitimately and genuinely don't see eye to eye as human beings, pretend to get on in the press conferences and that sort of thing, and there is that little bit of faux outrage and battles that go back and forth. But ultimately, I think even Max and Sergio Perez, the two Red Bull drivers under Horner, know that something probably needs to change. Like, Max is good friends with Daniel Ricciardo. Believe it or not, he has a fairly decent working relationship, it seems, with Lewis Hamilton as well, despite all that went on last year. So these drivers talk, on the grid, off the track. So it probably feels like the rule changes are going to come into effect, but whether or not they'll bring them in soon remains to be seen, because, of course, Mercedes want it to happen. Red Bull are quite happy as things go to continue on the way things are going, but you'd imagine something in the next number of weeks will come to a head with this porpoising, and as it affects, it's going to take a big crash. It's going to take this bouncing causing some serious issue, or a driver being quite visibly concussed in a post-race interview or something, I think, in order to change it. And really.
It shouldn't get to that stage. That's crazy. Like, it's so dangerous. And all the other factors that go along with it, like the heat that there was there at the weekend, all of those things must play a factor when you're in the car, like, your mind, everything like that in the heat. Then if you have this on top of it, the speed you're going, like, surely something needs to be done before it gets to that stage and there is a bad accident.
100%. And like, listening to Lewis afterwards talking about, he was just on the straight holding and biting down in his teeth due to the pain. That's how he described it. He said the only thing that really helped was the adrenaline, and you can imagine at those speeds, adrenaline would get rid of a certain amount of the pain for you at that particular moment. But he found it almost difficult to express the levels of pain that he was experiencing in the car. He was saying at the end of the straight, you just are praying for it to end. But then he goes on to say, look, still a good result for the team, 3rd and 4th. But as you said, actually, visibly distressed getting out of the car. He said it was the most painful race of his life, and he's had plenty of them. So, look, a growing number of drivers in support of these rule changes in some way to banish the bouncing. But yeah, when you hear drivers talking about having to bite down on their teeth to stop the pain on a straight, that's extremely concerning.
Yeah, so maybe a lack of a competitive head-to-head so far in this year's Formula 1 season, but that is a significant enough storyline, and that's one to keep an eye on over the next little while. So, Canadian Grand Prix this weekend in Montreal. Thanks a million for explaining that, Shane. Just before we let you go, tonight in Poland, it is Ireland against Ukraine in the final match of this international window. It's a 7:45 kickoff. James McLean was in front of the media yesterday and talked about his home gym as a sanctuary for him to, I guess, keep up to speed in his own fitness work, to get fitter, to get faster. Stephen Kenny was saying that he's actually added a yard of pace, he reckons, over the last little while. And it really feels that the stocks in James McLean have risen significantly over the last little while. I don't think it's been too long ago that people mostly wanted him out of the team or thought he wasn't good enough for Ireland. Are you a fully paid up member to the James McLean fan club?
Oh, I'm one of the biggest members of the James McLean fan club. I love him. I think, like, his attitude has always been quite admirable. Like, he's of an age now where he's clearly one of the more experienced members of that Irish squad. And to hear him talking like that in the press conference, even himself and Stephen Kenny were clearly in good form yesterday, laughing about. I think Gavin Cooney at the press conference asked, did James's presence at the press conference mean he was going to be captaining Ireland in this game tonight in Rouge? But James joking, like, I think the chef would probably be made captain before me. But of course he was joking. But he's only, as he said, 7 caps off 100. And to become a centurion for your country would be quite an achievement for James. Like, he offered, I think you both agree, he offered a lot more than Enda Stevens did in that left wing back position against Scotland. He just looks more dangerous. He gets more crosses into the box. Maybe you could argue that Stevens was unlucky in that he was taking on a Ukraine team, whereas the Scottish team probably plays a different way, allowed Ireland to get more crosses into the box. But James McLean adds so much to that Ireland setup. And when you have the talent of Obafemi and Parrott, obviously Obafemi looks like likely to not make the action tonight with injury. But when you have that talent in the box, you need to get the ball into the box. And McLean, for all that some people think he doesn't bring a lot to the Irish setup, when he can get the ball into the box like that, he creates chances. So, fully paid up member of the James McLean fan club right here. Yeah, absolutely. And the show goes, as you say, to Woodge tonight for that 7:45 kickoff. Shane, thanks a million for being with us. Appreciate it. Cheers, guys. Good stuff.
Commenting immediately, James McLean is a terrible player.
I think he needs to back it up now tonight. Like, that's going to be the big thing, because he hasn't been consistent, I don't feel, and there was questions over his performances for so long, and he did so well against Scotland. So yeah, I'm really backing him tonight to hopefully get a good performance in, and yeah, he'll shut a few people up, I think.
Yeah, I think he's been one of the more consistent players in the Stephen Kenny era. Fergus Keogh says if the Formula 1 drivers are in that much pain, they should refuse to drive. And maybe that's exactly what will happen, Fergus, over the next little while. Right, we're going to be chatting to Tommy Walsh very shortly indeed. We're going to be looking ahead to the All-Ireland Hurling quarter-finals. But before that, former Mayo and Armagh footballer Billy Joe Padden shared his thoughts on how Armagh beat Donegal at the weekend on last night's Off the Ball. Have a look.
Yes, and if you go into the second quarter of the game, after the outstanding goal that Rory Grugan scored, and it was fantastic from a throw-in move, great kick in by Rian O'Neill, Rory Grugan attacks the ball, and then he's a beautiful left foot. He actually placed it gently nearly into the top corner, wonderful finish. But after that, Donegal were playing really, really well. Michael Murphy in at the edge of the square, while he wasn't having an impact himself, it seemed to empower some of the forwards out the field, and their shooting they were much more eager to shoot, and they were accurate, and they went into a lead. But I didn't think the kick-outs and the kick-out strategy and the errors they made in that regard, then the black card and how that totally, it muddled everything for Donegal. But that was just the in that Armagh needed, because after that they were absolutely flawless throughout the rest of the game. Their usual aggressive selves, they were physical around the middle of the field, and then you saw the quality that Eoin O'Neill and Rory Grugan and players like that have. Soupy Campbell didn't have a great start to the game, but he's persistent, believes in his own ability, kept going, kept creating things, and they're a team now that's playing with a lot of energy, a lot of confidence, and they fully deserve their win.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the ball's the best, number one.
It's the GOAT of sports apps.
Talk about the greatest of all time. Nathan, Big Joe. Big Joe's the greatest of all time. He's the GOAT. We know it.
So
every single time. Yes.
It's tough going. It's tough for my ego. I'm going to say I'm the Djokovic of this scenario.
I love it.
This is OTB Sports Radio. Download the OTB Sports app now.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong. Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
12 minutes past 8, you're very welcome back. It is All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship quarter-final weekend. Well, it's not really a weekend, it's one day, it's Saturday, it's back-to-back fixtures. It's Galway against Cork at 1:45 on Saturday, and then Clare against Wexford is the second game at 3:45. They're both on at Semple Stadium, and Tommy Walsh is with us to look ahead to them. Tommy, good morning to you, how are you keeping?
Yeah, good morning, Owen.
First of all, the big story around these fixtures is obviously going to be with regards to the disciplinary process. It feels like every big hurling game needs to have one of these stories around it at the moment, and it looks like Cianan Fahey and Rory Hayes and Peter Duggan will appeal their bans tomorrow night. First of all, Tommy, is that a good idea in the week leading up to a game to be focusing on this sort of stuff, or do you think, sure, look, there's a chance that we might be able to get these players back, we may as well throw every dice we've got?
Yeah, I think it all depends on if you feel there's an injustice on. I think it's definitely worth exploring that avenue. I think if probably you look at two different type of instances, the one in the Munster final, I think what people in Clare are most disappointed with is the fact that there's only two instances shown on the Sunday game. Both of them are ones that people that were at the game didn't see, bar maybe they're right there. And like, were they the only two instances in the game? And I just think it is a dangerous avenue. Like, listen, the Sunday game is an iconic programme. I grew up watching it. It's the reason half the country, in Ireland are playing hurling, because they look forward to that evening, watching the highlights of their heroes, watching the great things happening. And I know the Sunday game, I'm sure they have a job to do. They have to highlight instances, whether they're good or bad. But I suppose what we have to be careful of is, like, do we just show the instances that the referee dealt with? Because otherwise you're going down on a very, very dangerous avenue, because, like, everyone will be crying out now from Clare and probably all over the country. Did they look at every incident in the game? And what that will lead to happening then is the referees or the referees council or whoever's looking over these video analysis, the CCC, they'll go back and explore every single incident in every game. And then you'll probably come out with 5 or 6 or 7 suspensions. And I know probably the message to be sent down for the future is, well, listen, if you don't do anything, you won't be suspended. But I just think it's a tough call at this stage of the season that only 2 instances were picked out. And I think that's probably what will disappoint most hurling people. There'll probably be no one can really say that there weren't, probably suspensions. I understand that. But just from a player's point of view, and the GA in particular, there's so many instances going on in every game. You could have 5 or 6 suspensions, you know.
The one thing I would say is that we're kind of unsure of how much of an influence the Sunday game has. Like, I'm sure it has some influence. There's like a couple of these situations where they've definitely aligned with television coverage, but there is kind of an element of secrecy around the CCCC where we don't get given enough information, it seems, when it comes to why they're taking these decisions and how they arrive at these decisions, and just a lack of transparency in general when it comes to the disciplinary process. You'd assume that would maybe help things along for everybody, really, if there was a bit more transparency on that front.
Well, I don't know about that either on, because if they start getting into that, they'll have to go through every incident and every game of every second. It could take hours and hours and looking at 5 or 6 different camera angles to see what you pick up. Like you see in the WhatsApps during the week, lads are picking up on video phones during the week, but you can't be going on that either. So, listen, it is a difficult one. I would probably like to see, maybe they have to do a job on the Sunday game on their nighttime programme, but I would like to see them dealing with the instance that the referee was looking at during the game, and everything else, leave it to the CCC. And I think most people will probably be happy enough with that. And say if an opposition were disappointed with a particular incident, that maybe they could, cite them. It's down to do in rugby, they could cite a particular incident if they wanted that. And because that would mean then if someone really felt badly about a certain way that a player was being managed, off the ball, that there was an avenue for him to explore. And otherwise now, most hurling people, you'd have to be very proud if you're in the family of Seamus Flanagan or on the team of Seamus Flanagan the weekend, and all the Limerick players, and the fact that when they did get the belts, they just got on with it. And that's the way we grew up hurling. That's the way hurling was played in your back garden. You give belts and you took belts and you just got on with it. And you let the referee maybe look after if there was that more serious. And I think them two lads, I think they deserve huge credit on the offside of that, is that they didn't look for anyone to be sent off. They weren't rolling around the ground. That showed the toughness of their mentality. That showed that they know the game. If they're willing to pull and drag over a player, listen, sometimes there's consequences. And I just say fair play to the two lads.
And obviously we see that it's a double header, Tommy, in Semple Stadium. Great to see it's in Semple Stadium, but the fact that it's a double header, I was just seeing on Twitter yesterday, there was a lot of comments, people can't get tickets. They're really hoping to get to these games, and it's becoming a problem. Should it have been a double header? Could we have seen it maybe on 2 different days?
I'd have to agree with the double header, Aisling. We're all raving on about the Munster final versus the Leinster final. The whole of Ireland probably could have got to throw apart for the Leinster final that night. And we're all giving out that the atmosphere was terrible. So go back to the Munster final, Terra 6 were sold out in 11 minutes. It was impossible to get tickets. I never got as many texts for tickets for a match even when I was playing, and just couldn't be got. So listen, I think the real diehards, they will get tickets for that match, I would imagine, through their clubs and through their contacts, and that if you really, really want to go, I would find you will get a ticket somewhere, whether you have to drive to Donegal or drive to the far side of the country to get one, you will get one. And I think it'll lend itself to a huge, huge atmosphere. And like we've seen even in the football in Clones versus Croke Park last weekend, we've seen the Leinster versus the Munster final, we've seen earlier round robins when Kilkenny went up to Pearse Stadium. It was electric. I was up there myself. It was like knockout championship game. So I fully agree with putting the double header in Thurles, which will lend itself to a huge atmosphere.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely that it's in Thurles. But do you think it could have been 2 different days? Could they not have sold that out twice, had the same atmosphere twice? Would there not have been that amount of crowd by 2?
Possibly, but I would doubt it.
Okay.
I don't know how Thurles holds, probably 45,000 people. And I just think it lends itself to be 4 sets of supporters hanging around Thurles all morning. I was there for the Munster final earlier in 12:15, and I just thought it was just one of those days that you just had to be there. I think quarterfinals, yes, maybe there'll be huge interest this weekend because there's 4 teams with, it seems like a 50-50 chance each. There's no clear-cut favourites. But I think normal days, quarterfinals should be a day where all 4 teams go together, and it should lend itself to a huge day out.
And just when you're talking about the tickets there, you were saying that people were asking for tickets, they'd be looking for tickets. I remember you saying before that you used to keep a book of all the people that used to ask you for tickets, and you'd write down their name and then you give it to your mum.
Yeah. Oh, that was it. sure, All-Ireland final day, so whatever day it used to be, it was the first week in September. So the minute a lad had asked me for a ticket, he'd go into the book. And, you could have 50, 60, 70 requests, and they went up to Mammy then, and we kind of went through the list, just who deserved them the most. So listen, there could be a lot of lads texting me after this show saying, you never gave me tickets, I think I deserved one. But no, that's the way it was. It was very easy. And people used to get carried away. I remember it was the Kerry men, you'd really laugh that time when I was starting hurling about the Kerry guys. They were giving guidance that time in the media on how to deal with All-Ireland finals. And I just felt, rolling up to an All-Ireland final, my head was never erect with it. Because someone, no matter who asked me, they went into that book and I didn't think about it again until I got the tickets. When I got the tickets, I went through it, and listen, most of them were gone to your aunties and uncles and first cousins anyway. So that's just the way it was. But yeah, it's a nice way of dealing with it. And I had, would you believe, Aisling, the All-Ireland final could be on a Sunday. You could have a leg call at your door 6:30 Saturday evening. See, is there a ticket?
Imagine, you're trying to get your head in the game there, Tommy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable stuff. But if you kind of have a positive attitude towards it, that's the way I looked at it. It was kind of organised, done and dusted. And there's no tickets. If you asked me, are we coming up to the game for a ticket? I would say, no, they were gone. They were done dusted for 2 weeks beforehand. So there was no search for tickets the night before All-Ireland.
They have to deal with that for Munster Hurling final day and for All-Ireland quarter-final day, it turns out, this year, Tommy.
Yeah, this isn't a great complaint.
Absolutely.
Last year we were at games with 2,000 people we were at the All-Ireland a couple of years ago, no one had it. It's unbelievable. I think this is what we want. And the Crow Heart can't get it right every day. You've seen the criticism they got for the last few weekends of not of having them up in Crow Heart. Now they're doing this and they're going to get a bumper crowd and it's going to be an amazing day, So I think, listen, all credit goes to Crow Park. It's a lad that made the fixtures years ago told me fixtures are always easy until you have to go make, and then you'll find out how difficult they are. So listen, huge credit. As the hurling man, as a neutral, I can't wait to go to Thurles on Saturday for 2 great games.
The first of those 2 games is Galway against Cork. It's a 1:45 throw-in. The big question for Galway was around the performance in Croke Park. It felt like a flat occasion, but it felt like a relatively flat performance from Galway. When you're in a squad like that, how do you manage to fix an intangible like flatness in the space of 2 weeks?
Yeah, well, I suppose they had been unbeaten coming up to it, and there's nothing like a loss to raise or sharpen your focus. And they hadn't had that probably since the earlier rounds, probably the league stages. They were all maybe the 9 points to top the league. But I disagree with a lot of commentary around the game in regards. I thought they worked very, very hard. I just thought what let them down on the day was their execution. Kilkenny came with a ferociousness, as we always expect Kilkenny after a loss like that. Brian Cody had his team just humming for the day, regards work rate, regards savagery, regards physicality. And I thought Galway brought it too for long parts of that game on. I think what let them down in the end was their execution. Joseph Cooney had a great goal chance. He went straight through and went to kick it, which is always a 50-50, unless you're, from Kerry maybe, or from Tyrone, or, one of the Dublin footballers. For most hurlers, it's a 50-50 one where you kick it, whether it goes into the goal or over to the sideline. And he just went straight at Eoin Murphy. And if he had to bat at that ball, the Cork team used to train, Donald O'Grady used to train the Cork and Limerick hurlers that time when he was coaching them. When you get in near the goal, just bat that ball into the net. Then Conor Whelan had 2 great chances. One where he bounced it into the ground and with very little pace. We've seen Gerard Hegarty doing that in the Munster final, but skidded at huge pace into the corner. I know he had more time and more space to make the swing, but Conor Whelan would normally put them in the back of the net. The other one was the cross over from, I think it was Brian Concannon, and he just missed the control. Now, it was the pace on the pass was probably a bit too fast, but still it was a super goal chance. And then there was another one where one of the Galway forwards was going through and it was a body block by Eoin Murphy. So there was 4 very, very good, and I wouldn't call them half chances, I'd say great goal chances that they didn't take. So I would disagree with a lot of the commentary on. I thought they came with huge physicality to that game, and they missed a lot of chances.
So they're in a good position, you think, after 2 weeks ago, that there's actually not a whole pile to fix, because those hurlers, the fellas that you've listed out there, are all exceptional hurlers. That execution is absolutely in their locker, and it's just about, I guess, finding the right moments and just executing better this week. Is it as simple as that for Galway to get over the line against Cork?
Well, when you miss 4 goal chances, they have been a team that score a lot of points. I think it's more calmness in front of him. It probably needs to be done on the training ground where you put those guys into those situations. Say, listen, calm down. I always remember listening to the Gooch Cooper, stuck in my head from an interview we gave years ago. I think he said it at Donaghy. When you're going through and goal, don't just blast the ball. Pick a spot and just glide it in. You'll be so close to the goalie, he won't have the reactions to stop it. And I watched his Laker Gale only 2 or 3 weeks ago again, and he was pointing that fact out again. So he was one of the greatest finishers, in the game. And hurling is, a similar game, except for just you're using a stick in the ball. And I think the great players, that's what they do. They pick a spot. Like the Limerick guys, I think, are absolutely outstanding at. Galan, Hegarty, just when they see the goalie coming, they just slot somewhere where he's not, or they put it to his bad side. So I think either it's spoken to him, but I think a lot of that comes from practicing on the training ground on. But I think what will be tough for Galway is we've seen the 4 provincial finalists in the football with their 2-week break. It's such a disappointment losing the provincial final, especially when you're coming from a position where you're mad to win it. You haven't been winning it year in, year out. And it's where Clare will find it very difficult. It's where Galway will find it very, very difficult. They're so disappointed. You've seen Henry Shefflin on the sideline after the game. So, downtrodden, so disappointed. So can they pick themselves up? That will be the question with their spirit and their liveliness. Or will they be, finding it tough like the provincial finalists in the football?
And just looking at Cork as well, like they had a bit of a slow start and then they came into their own. And someone that I think has really had a really big impact is Conor Lahan. He's been exceptional for them. What have you made of him so far, Tommy?
Yeah, Aisling, Lahan has been outstanding, and I remember watching him back in county finals and just giving a tour de force of Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I remember one of his first years, I'd say probably around maybe 2012, I'd say, or 13. He was coming onto the stage. We were playing him down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and he's just so fast. He was back then. So he had a great career, although they didn't win an All-Ireland. And he was dropped, last year and asked back onto the panel this year. And they say, what, to hell with you. You didn't want me last year. How do you think that if I put in the training from now until then that you're going to suddenly have belief in me? But no, he went back, showed his mental resolve, showed his toughness, and he's been outstanding, one of the main leaders actually for this Cork team. The big question for them is which Cork team turns up. When they turn up with an attitude and it's all to do with defending, coming from number 15 back to their goalkeeper, will they turn up with an attitude of defending, or will it be a case of when the ball comes to me, or I work so hard to get the ball and put it over the bar in the back of the net, I don't care about the other side of the game. Hurling is a 50-50 game. When you have the ball and when you don't have the ball. When Cork turn up, when they have no attitude towards chasing the opposition, towards taking the ball back off them, they're a total different team. We've seen in the last game or two, they turned up with the attitude that, yes, listen, it's my responsibility. Shane Kingston has showed it. Darren Fitzgibbon has showed it. With chase backs and last minute hoops, last minute blocks, sometimes just getting in your body. We spoke about this at the very start in their first game when they lost it. They have been doing that in the last game or two. And if they stay doing that, I give them, I'd nearly put them favourites.
And there's a few injury concerns. Robert Downey, Sean O'Donoghue, as you mentioned there, Shane Kingston, as well. They're unsure. So if those type of players are out, that's going to be worrying for them.
It will be worrying, but it also can and might be no harm to Cork. It give you an extra focus. They seem to, when they're very, very focused and depending the pressure is off them, they hurl at their best. We've seen Clare when they were missing 6. We thought Waterford would beat them by 10, 15 points. Probably, if you're trying to get through in that Munster group, you're probably giving out about Clare. The Cork were playing that weekend and they were probably worried that, listen, Clare are definitely going to win, or Waterford are definitely going to win. Clare are down 6 men, their main men were missing. John Conlon was missing, Tony Kelly was missing, and we've seen the tour de force that Clare gave blown in against Waterford. So I think that'll be in Cork's locker. Cork is a big hurling county. Cork always has great hurlers, so they'll have no problem, I think, bringing in guys. And I never think hurling is what their downfall is, Aisling. I think their downfall is their attitude towards defending. I think if they are missing 1 or 2, I might bring them that razor sharp focus to go out and win this weekend.
You said there a moment ago you'd make them favourites if they bring that level of aggression. Do you think they will? Do you make them favourites?
Yeah, I do make them favourites. One, for the simple reason is I think Galway are going to be so disappointed after that Leinster final. It's going to be so difficult for them to pick themselves back up. Now, if they do pick themselves back up and they play with the fire and the brimstone that you associate with Galway in the earlier rounds, well then, listen, it'll be absolutely a 50-50 game. But I think it's just going to be so tough for this Galway team to pick it back up. And I think the upper trajectory of this Cork team, I think that's where they're going. And I think, it'll lend to a victory for Cork.
Just before we move on to the second game, just something you said there a moment ago about unless you're a Kerry or a Tyrone hurler, you don't kick the ball. What was your policy on kicking the ball as a hurler? Did you just avoid at all costs, or was it something that you reverted to when needs must?
Well, there's a back, just boot.
You're talking about finishing, you're talking about scoring with the boot.
Yeah, well, no, when you're scoring with the boot is far different. So when I always used to try and hit it with the hurling player and so on, instead away from it. But we're starting to play a bit of football here in Tyrone now these days. We entered the Under-21 Championship and we got bet in the league final. We won the county final, so we must be doing something right.
Happy days. Who did you beat in the county final?
I won't say because we're playing in the Under-11 hurling county final tomorrow. It's going to be a big battle, so we'll set it up.
Keeping the cards close
I
to the
find
chest.
as well when you kick the sliotar, because if you hit the ridge wrong on the sliotar, it can go anyway. So that's a big thing. Even if you play football, it can be quite tough to gauge it right and to connect with it right. So I sometimes think it doesn't even matter if you play football, you can just connect with it wrong, whatever way it's sitting, and it can go anyway.
Yeah. I think most footballers anyway, when they're I suppose trying to position the ball, they're kind of roundhouse, they're kind of with the inside near their ankle, that's where they're kind of hit the inside of their foot. Whereas you can't really get any power in hurling ball. As you said, if you hit the rim in the wrong place, you don't know where it's going to end up. So I think that's the problem with the hurling ball, I think you just have to give it with the laces. I'm sure it can go anywhere.
So Clare Wexford is the second of the doubleheader on Saturday, and Shane O'Donnell's been out doing media this week. A lot of really interesting things that he's been speaking about. He's been talking about his concussion. He talks about 6 or 7 weeks where his brain wasn't functioning. He says after an extended period of time, he says hurling was gone. You have to fully come to terms with what happened a few days after what he was feeling, and having felt the full brunt of the symptoms, he accepted that he was never going to hurl again, he said. It's really extraordinary stuff, because his inclusion this year, his switch to wing forward, his comeback for Clare, has been part of a really significant part, Tommy, of this Clare resurgence this season.
Yeah, and it was very, it was a very good article, and he spoke, very well about it, and it just showed, I suppose, the addiction to sport, that he wasn't able to stay away from it in the end, even though he knew the consequence of what happened to him last year. Like, it's just more than just winning or losing. Like, you're getting down to the dressing room with the lads, or the girls you're playing in ladies Gaelic football or camogie, and it's such an addictive thing. Like, you're getting out of the house, you're down amongst your peers there for 2 hours, 3 or 4 times a week, you're in the gym together. Like, it is a very addictive scene, being part of a club team or a county team. And that's what probably hit me most when he spoke about the concussion. He knew how serious it was at the time, but he thought that he would never, and he was comfortable at that time of never playing again. But as soon as he felt good to go again, he was back, and he spoke about it quite well. He's after putting on a few kilograms, and that's what's after, I suppose, helping him in his ability, he's supposed to deal with the physicality out around the half Ireland, because we all know that's where the bodies are these days, that middle third. And I think regards his head, I suppose it gave him a new lease of life. When you're inside, you have to be very patient on you. It can be very frustrating. If you don't have a patient type of personality, your head can really go inside, because you mightn't get the ball for 15, 20 minutes. But when it does come in, you have to be hungry and fresh, and you have to be waiting for the opportunity. Like Christy Ring used to always say, like, a goal in the last 5 minutes is just as important as a goal in the first 5 minutes. And that's why he never got too caught up with how a game was going. He was just waiting for his chance. And Shane O'Donnell has been in there for many years, so it's great to see him out in the half Ireland, and he's a new lease of life out there. As he said himself, even when he's not in the game with the ball, he can go around making the tackles, chasing, the wing back, going up to make a run up to score a goal or for a pass. So he feels like he's in the game all the time. So a great work ethic, and I'd say one of the first names down the team for Brian Lahan.
When you're analysing this game, do you have the same concern around Clare and their disappointment from a provincial final defeat as you would have had around Galway, or is this a little bit different because Limerick are just so good and Clare can take a lot out of the draw and then the defeat?
Yeah, no, I would actually take even more. I would put more, probably on this game, because Clare have been hurling out of their skin in every game since the Munster Championship began, even when they dropped the 6 guys for their last game. So they have been just hurling at peak performance for the last nearly 2 months, and Shane said it in his interview. He said it was one of the most disappointing games that he was part of, because they played so well, gave it everything, and still lost. And I often found that myself when you play a game, that is, when you play well and lose, there's people coming up congratulating you, telling you, you had a great game, or the team had a great game. But your overriding feeling inside your own head and body is you're devastated, you're disappointed. So you're thankful for and grateful for the people, because probably you played well and the team played well, but you still lost. And it is devastating, and it's nearly harder, I found, because you don't have that probably bit growing up inside your soul or inside your heart to say, we're going to get them the next day, because everyone's congratulating you on. You'd rather if someone said, you were terrible the last day, and in your head you're saying, I'm going to show them next Sunday or next Saturday in Thurles. The Clare guys have lads congratulating them, telling them how great a team they are and how they will still get over, Wexford this weekend. I think that's going to be it's the mental side of it for Clare is going to be their biggest mission this weekend. If they can, as I would say, reset, it's over now. Don't try and we'll say, lads, remember how we played against Limerick, remember how we played against Waterford. Forget all that, and you just focus on the next game. This will take on a life of its own. We're playing a very, very hungry Wexford team. They'll bring huge support. They have great belief now. They're after getting a great win last weekend, and they got through probably against Kilkenny when nobody in Wexford even gave them a chance in All Park that night. So they're, again, like Cork, they're on the upward curve, and they have very, very good hurlers as well, and they're probably playing a more attacking style now. They've Conor McDonald, they've Rory O'Connor, they've Lee Chin, so they have hurlers that can hurt you. So I think this will be Clare's most difficult game in the whole championship.
But Clare to progress?
I don't know, because you're probably saying, Tommy, you should have thought about this, but I did. I did, Eoin, and I just don't know. Like, they're possibly, it's going to be very difficult to get off it on a technicality for 2 guys to get off in the suspension. So they could be very down, these 2 guys, plus feeling the way they're feeling. And listen, I think it's going to be a very tight game. But listen, no, I give it the verdict to Clare on the basis of respect and what they've done in the championship so far. But I see it as a 50-50 game, and that's no word of a lie.
If they weren't already golden tickets for the doubleheader on Saturday, you've made them even more golden. I think after that, Tommy, there should be 2 absolutely cracking games. Before we let you go, the weekly shout out from Tommy Walsh is the most eagerly anticipated part of the segment. Who have we got this morning?
Well, I don't know about that, but the shout outs, they come from all over, and there could be we've had a manager so far, we've had a hurler, we've had games. So this week I'm going for a commentator as Micheál O'Mahertig. I think we can all agree, this man, he was a colossus. He was a national treasure. I was just looking up some of the stuff that, he has done over the years. But I was even thinking of my own story, how many families grow up listening to this guy? You turn on the radio, you go out to the kitchen, and he would just, you didn't even feel like you were at the game. You felt you were a part of the game. You felt you were hurling in the game. It's just the culture that he grew up, his mastery of the Irish language, his mastery of every language, the English language as well. He was just out on his own, and he's my shout out this week. I think he's the best commentator in any sport, in any country in the world. He really brought our family absolutely, loved him. He's loved all over Ireland. He's loved all over the world. There was some, I was trying to get up to quotes. He had great humour as well, Eoin and Aisling. And I was looking up quotes last night that he came up with, and I nearly spent an hour going through them. But I came up with 2 that he said. I thought they were brilliant. He said, Colin Corkery on the 45. Let's go with the right boot. It's over the bar. This man shouldn't be playing football. He's made an almost Lazarus-like recovery from a heart condition. Lazarus was a great man, but he couldn't kick pints like Colin Corkery. up with that kind of stuff. Like he was very intelligent as well. And my favourite one then was he was talking, it must have been a Tyrone game, and he goes, and Brian Dooher is down injured. And while he is, I'll tell you a little story. I was in Times Square in New York last week, and I was listening to the championship back home. So I approached the newsstand, and I suppose you wouldn't have the Kerry man, would you? To which the Egyptian behind the counter turned to me, and he said, "Do you want the North Kerry edition or the South Kerry edition?" he had both, so I bought both. And Dooher is back on his feet. So,
legend.
He was amazing. And one last small one then was, and this was, again, just showed his wit and his humour. And which is everything the G is about. It is about winning, it is about hurling, it is about football, but it's about the crack and the camaraderie as well. And he goes, the stopwatch has stopped. It's up to God and the referee now. The referee is Pat Horan and God is God. So listen, and before every game as well, on Nashing, like I listen to him going up to matches. I put it on the YouTube, and I put the phone over in the passenger seat of the car, and I listen to him, whether it's going to Thurles or whether it's going to Croke Park, just to get in the, trying to learn from him, obviously. Like this guy seen it as obviously a career, but it was his mission to help the viewers, not to help the players, but to help the viewers, the listeners, that he brought the game to them, and they were the most important people in Ireland when he was commentating. And when you do listen to him go, you just see how important it is that you need to be up for it, and you need to do your best when you're looking at a game. And there was a few things that I do listen to, and one of them, if any of our listeners, he does a great commentary on making a ham sandwich.
Oh yeah.
And, if you look it up on YouTube, and that's absolutely outstanding. And he does a hurler's prayer great as well. And even I used to try and listen to games that he commentated on. And for the first few years when I was with yourselves, the only one I could find was 2010 All-Ireland. So how great a commentator Micheál Mahirtig is. The only game I could listen to was the 2010 All-Ireland, Tipperary beat us in, and I still listen to him just to hear him.
Wow.
And now, thankfully, someone put up the 96 All-Ireland, so I'm listening to Wexford winning their All-Ireland now, so it's much better.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you'll have Micheál on YouTube going to Thurles this weekend?
I will, yeah, every game. Just because, the way some complacent, like Brian Cody always thought was complacency, like it's a need, it's a disease, it has to be out of the dressing room, and he never let it creep in. But I just find going to a match, you could think you're going as a supporter just to enjoy the occasion, but I suppose your job working for yourselves is, to, I suppose, tell the listeners what you're looking at and try and bring the game, I suppose, to them. So I just find if you turn on him for 5 minutes, and it might be just him making a ham sandwich, it makes you just alive, and you feel, listen, you have an important job to do now in 2 or 3 hours. So you just feel up for it, yeah.
Tommy Walsh, absolutely fantastic stuff as always. Thanks a million. Enjoy the weekend.
Best luck. Bye.
Setting the table early before the All-Ireland quarterfinals this weekend. Tommy Walsh there, and it's going to be a cracking doubleheader in Thurles on Saturday. Right, time for the papers.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be, no, I'm not,
yes.
No.
John Duggan, a very good morning to you.
Eoin and Aisling, how are we doing?
Yeah, very well. Was Micheál Mahirtig somebody that filled your kitchen up back in the day?
Oh, massively. The greatest commentator I've ever heard. The 1991 Meath Dublin. Aisling, you'd be happy to hear this if you heard it at the time. Maybe might be a bit young, but the greatest commentary I've ever heard of a sporting event when David Beggy put the ball over the bar after Kevin Foley had scored the goal. It is on YouTube, and it's the greatest thing I've ever heard. The fourth game of that incredible summer between the Dubs and Meath, and the Dubs had that game in the palm of their hands, and Meath had an incredible comeback, and it was 2-10 to 15 points, I think it was. Dublin missed a penalty, and best thing I've ever heard. I remember going to England as a young man, like it was working away in England when I was in college, and I could get the satellite feed of Micheál Mahirtig, so I was able to listen to RT radio on Sunday afternoons in the UK. And in the summer of '95, when Dublin won the All-Ireland, I remember JO in the semi-final against Cork, and he just had that ability to really put the hairs down the back of your like to get them stand up the back of your neck and shiver down your spine when he's 50 yards out, he's 40 yards out, he's 30 yards out, he's 20 yards out. And you really felt you could imagine where the ball was, whether it was the sliotar or the football was. And he was able to then build up a crescendo for something when it was about to become a goal. So he was able to just paint the pictures of what was going on in the game and inject incitement into people's living rooms and people's cars. He was just one of a kind. And one of the interesting things with Micheál Marhuirsig was he wasn't really the number one RT radio commentator, I don't think, until the 80s. So he came to it quite late in life, I believe, as a commentator. As always says, there's always time, folks, to become the number one in your chosen field. It doesn't have to be just because you missed it in your 30s or your 40s. Like, he was in his early 60s when he was doing that Meath Dublin commentary in 1991. So, yeah, no, there'll never be another like Micheál Marhuirsig, whether it's just the breadth of information, the depth of information, the quips like about Sean O'Halpine and the hurling stronghold and Armagh, was it Fiji and that kind of thing, or Teddy McCarthy to Larry McCarthy, no relation. Larry McCarthy to Teddy McCarthy, still no relation. Those kind of commentaries. So no, there'll never be another like Micheál Marhuirsig. He was the greatest.
Absolutely.
Yeah, big time. I met him actually a few years ago in Ballyboden. I had the pleasure of interviewing him, and I was so nervous because he was such an idol growing up, you know. And I remember meeting him, and just he puts you at ease, telling me like, "You're interviewing me now. Remember that?" I was like, "Okay, yeah." And I remember afterwards then he was leaving and he had a phone, but I don't think it was any smartphone or anything like that. And he was going out the door and he turned back and he said, "Which way is it now to get to the M50? And I was just like, "Oh God, right, go down this way." And I just pointed and he said, "This way." Okay, grand. Out he went. He just needed me to point him in the direction. You know, he said, "I have a map in the car." I was like, "Grand, off you go." Old school, but such a lovely man. And yeah, it was unbelievable to meet him. Have you ever met him, Eoin?
Oh yeah, we've had him in
He's
here
been in
a few
here,
times. Yeah, I do go back to that sandwich video regularly. That's my relaxing YouTube video, watching Micheál Marhuirsig making sandwiches on loop, and it's the same sandwich over and over again. It's fantastic. It is the best thing on the internet.
I sat beside him at the 2013 football final between Mayo and Dublin. We were both at the back of the press box. And somebody, you know, that Aircom used to have this thing where you could find yourself in the crowd. And somebody found the pair of us in the crowd and sent me the photo, which is kind of funny.
Nice to have.
Nice to have, yeah. Nice to have.
There is a lot happening in the world of sport at the moment. John, where do you want to start?
Yeah, there's some breaking news. Andrew Goodman is now going to be the assistant coach of Leinster from next season, replacing Felipe Contepomi. So the Kiwi earned 17 caps as a player for Leinster between 2012 and 2014. He will be the assistant coach at Leinster from next season. That is a breaking story. Andy Farrell naming a squad of about 40 players this lunchtime for the Tour of New Zealand. 3 tests down under against the All Blacks. Robert Balacuna's a doubt. Ronan Kelleher, probably quite a serious doubt. Ronan Kelleher with a shoulder problem. Hopeful for places on the plane for Kieran Frawley, Joe McCarthy, Cian Prendergast, Johnny Sexton going to captain the side. Huge day for Republic of Ireland players at under-21 and senior level. Under-21s play Italy and Ascoli at 4:30. If they win, they qualify for the first ever time for European Championship. They've got the escape hatch of a guaranteed playoff spot already for the finals in Georgia and Romania, but 4:30 it's on TV, must watch. And then we have the 7:45 kickoff, the match live and off the ball on News Talk for Ukraine against the Republic of Ireland at senior level in Łódź in Poland. No Michael Obafemi, no Shane Duffy, no John Egan. Dara O'Shea, Dara Lenihan tipped to start in defence. Chizoze Ogbene could get a start in the forward positions. Scott Hogan could even get a start. So we'll see what happens when Stephen Kenny names his team later on. We also have in the back pages this morning, the Irish Independent reporting that Peter Duggan and Rory Hayes in Galway's Keane and Fahy will appeal proposed bans arising from the recent Senior Hurling Championship appearances. We know the bans were retrospectively applied by the CCCC. Clare is set to play Wexford and Galway against Cork in the All-Ireland quarterfinals in Thurles on Saturday. Day 1 of Royal Ascot. 3 Group 1 races down for decision. 2:30 the start time there. A meeting at Roscommon at 10:05. In swimming at the Para World Championships in Madeira. Nicole Turner, Barry McClements and Amy Sheridan all in the pool for Ireland today. And we will have the US Open starting at Brookline on Thursday. Shane Larry has been put in a group with the Live Rebels, Phil Mickelson, Louis Westhuizen. Rory McIlroy, freshman, has won at the Canadian Open, will play with Xander Schauffele and Hideki Matsuyama for the first 2 rounds. And Seamus Power will be in a group with Jo Hyung Kim and Min Woo Lee even. If I can get it right. I got it right eventually. But the interesting thing yesterday was the awkward nature of the Phil Mickelson press conferences when he was asked about the criticism that the LIV golfers have received from the 9/11 victims and families, one of those groups. And I haven't seen Phil Mickelson as awkward in front of a camera in quite a long time. It was an uncomfortable watch, and that's what's happened when you make the betting he's made with LIV Golf and the Saudis.
Is Phil going to appear in Virtual Insanity this week?
He's not. There's not a hope. Virtual Insanity, the selections have been made. The birdcage is ready. The cloak is over the birdcage. We will bring the birdcage into studio tomorrow at about 8:35, and then we'll take the cloak off and reveal the winner of the US Open for 2022.
It sounds like the steamiest segment that's ever going to happen on OTB AM. I look forward to it. John Duggan, thanks
again.
again.
All right, folks. Aisling and Owen, cheers.
Cheers. That's your sports news.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be. No, I'm not having that. No.
It's 10 to 9. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Now I'm delighted to welcome Tyrone goalkeeper Niall Morgan back to the show for a bit of a reflection on the season that was. Niall, good morning to you. Thanks a million for taking the call. How are things?
I suppose it could be better. Obviously, disappointing season, but back to the club and stuff. So started with a defeat as well. So
yeah,
interesting times ahead.
Yeah, I saw you were lining out at number 15 for Eden Dork last week.
Yeah, well, sort of started in the full forward line, and then it wasn't working in there, so I went to midfield and it wasn't working there, so I was dropped to sweeper, so I could be in goals by this weekend the way things are going.
So what happened in the throughout the game that allowed you to keep being dropped back further and further and further?
I sort of play a sweeper for the club whenever we're ahead, and try to shore up things in the back, but the ball just wasn't coming in, and then of course I started complaining, so moved me out, and then I realised I can't run anymore, so I moved myself sort of further back into sweeper, and we end up losing by 5 points, but it happens. A stark welcome back it was.
What are we now? Is it 8, 9, 10 days from the Armagh defeat? It's obviously something that's still on the top of your mind, Niall. Is it something generally after the end of a season that you take that defeat with you for a while and stew over it and try and take things from it for as long as possible?
Yeah, I suppose, like, whenever you get beaten your last game, like the Derry game, I suppose, going back to it, was not easy to take, but at least you've got another chance in a few weeks' time, whereas after the Armagh defeat and the way the seasons went and the shortened season, you're not going to have another championship game for nearly a full year. So it'd be hard to take. Not that we're any stranger to it, like we've been put out early before, but like we have to look, apart from the really shortened season of 2020, we have to look back to 2014 for an exit as early as that. So it was very disappointing, and that defeat was by Armagh as well, so it was very disappointing to go out like that, and I suppose it gives us plenty of time to mull over it and see what went wrong and see what we can do to better ourselves for next year.
Had you felt that you had righted the wrongs of the Derry game in between that and the Armagh game? Like, were you going in there with a real sense of confidence that Tyrone were going to be back in this fixture?
Absolutely. It was the same. Like, we didn't have a great league. We finished it off strongly with a win over Kerry, and we sort of felt like that was us sort of going to come back and start hitting our peak again. We trained really well right up until the Derry game, and then we put in a real flat performance. With all credit to Derry, like we just didn't have the answers, and we sort of felt like we trained really well between Derry and Armagh then, and that we were going to be able to iron things out. And again, it was a flat performance, but the credit has to go to Armagh for making us play that way. Like,
There's been a couple of things that have been, I guess, mentioned as reasons for Tyrone's exit early this year from the championship. I'm just very keen to get your take on them. Like, one of them is obviously the lads walking away from the panel this year. Did that have an impact on what happened this season?
It did. Like, at the start of the year, I was quite outspoken by saying that, yes, they would be missed, but at the end of the day, there's plenty of people to replace them. But like, the lads that left all had huge experience, and they were all pushing the starting 15 on and creating a better environment of training and stuff. And whenever you brought up a lot of sort of inexperienced players, they maybe were happy to do, like, I suppose in work terms, a line year, where they sort of felt like, they were in to get their experience in the first year and then push on from their second year. And it probably not held us back in training, but it just wasn't at the same intensity because of that, because we were used to always being pushed on, and if you didn't perform, you lost your place. Whereas maybe there was a little bit of complacency set in this year, that a group of lads knew that we were going to play.
Was there a common reason why a lot of them left?
No, they all actually had their own reasons. Like, some of them were just coming to the end of their time and felt like they had nothing more to give. Some of them were moving house. Some of them were getting ready to get married. Some of them wanted to travel, and just like, there's no fallout or anything as such. It was just everybody was sort of coming to that time, and like, it was lads that had served Tyrone for a number of years. It wasn't that lads were there for 2 or 3 years and decided they've had enough. It was just boys had basically run their course and were ready to try new things.
So now you could actually feel it in training then, that it wasn't the same intensity to the year prior. Like, it wasn't up to probably that standard that you would have set when you won the All-Ireland.
Yeah, like, you always feel like you're training your best, but like, whenever you reflect back on it, you probably realise that there was the small percentages that we were doing last year were probably missing a little bit. And like, you obviously don't mean for it to happen, and you don't go out and say, oh, we won the All-Ireland this year, we're not going to try next year. And it wasn't that we were looking back and saying, oh, we're the best team in Ireland. And we actually sort of spoke about maybe we weren't using the title enough, in terms of we weren't imposing ourselves in games. Like, whenever Dublin are All-Ireland champions, or Kerry are All-Ireland champions, and they come to play, there's that aura about them, that they're sort of mentally wise, they're saying that you're not going to beat us because we're the best team in Ireland, whereas we didn't really have that sort of confidence about us, and it maybe held us back from, like, imposing ourselves, as I say, and finishing out games and really beating teams, and it told, come the championship.
That's really interesting, because I think that the automatic analysis of any team after winning a trophy who doesn't manage to win that trophy again is that, they got carried away with the notions of being champions of whatever competition it may be. But it's really interesting to hear you say that it's the opposite of that maybe the chest wasn't puffed out enough this year. Yeah,
definitely. Like, and it's an inexperienced thing from our part. Like, we've obviously, there wasn't any players in that team had won the All-Ireland before. Obviously, there's minors and Under-21 medals there, but like, we maybe just didn't use it to our advantage, and nearly have teams coming, especially to Healy Park, and saying, like, this is our home ground, you're coming to the home of the All-Ireland champions and you're not getting out of here with anything today. And whereas we nearly, I wouldn't say shied away, but we didn't want it to look like we were arrogant or that we expected to win again, and it probably went against us then in the end.
Was there almost like a nervousness that you are actually the All-Ireland champions and you didn't get the results at the start of the year that you would have liked, and then you go into the league and probably not the results or performances that you would have been known to put in from the previous year? So does there a bit of, I don't know, as you said, complacency, nervousness all around the whole situation then?
Yeah, I think, like, last year, obviously at the start of the year was the lockdown, and like, we had 2 or 3 months where we weren't together, but we were all putting in a lot of work, individually. Whenever we arrived at training, we started off the year and we were flying fit, so we had a lot of time to work on the basics. Whereas this year, we went on our holiday and we didn't train at all beforehand, and we never caught up. And it was easy to see that. We tried to do a couple of run sessions in Florida and Miami, and we'd done a couple of gym sessions, but it just wasn't the same. And you probably felt for a period at the start of the league like the work wasn't done in comparison to last year, where we knew we were hitting the ground running. And it just fed into the rest of the year. Because of the shortened season, there wasn't really a time where you could do a catch-up block, because it was just games coming thick and fast. And that's probably the biggest learning curve for us, is that if you don't have the work done at the start of the year, you're not going to be able to catch up at any point now.
Just when you mentioned the holiday there, I know it was quite late because of COVID. It was probably pushed out quite a bit. I just often thought, what did Brian Dewar and Fergal Logan think of that? Did they think that the holiday was too late to be going away? Obviously you should go on the holiday, enjoy it, you win in All-Ireland, but did they think it's too late now, lads, we're into the next year?
No, anytime Tyrone ever get to an All-Ireland, the holiday was always at the same time of year. You went straight after Christmas, and it was to suit the teachers basically, because they couldn't get off school during the year. But just thinking back to 2018, we had a bit of training behind us before we even went on holiday, whereas this year I think we had total of maybe 3 sessions done, and that was because after the All-Ireland last year we still had 10 club league games to play on the championship, so our club season didn't finish to the second week in December, so we didn't even have a chance really to have a bit of a break, and we were just straight back in and then there's boys carrying knocks and stuff, and just it's, I suppose it's their excuses in a way, but we didn't deal with them well enough as a group, and it's big learning for us that going forward, if we were ever in the position again, we'd have to be doing things differently.
You say that maybe you haven't really properly processed the end of the season just yet, but from what you're saying there, it sounds like you've already put your finger on exactly what happened this year. I'd say all of your subconsciouses have touched on exactly what went wrong for Tyrone in 2022.
Yeah, I would be a deep enough thinker in terms of what is going wrong, even whenever things are going right. I'm trying to nearly pick holes and see where I can get better, where we can get better, and we haven't had an end of season meeting or anything, and because we were straight back into the clubs, but I think everybody's got the same general idea, and nobody's blaming one person or saying that it was it all fell on one mistake or whatever. There was loads of things throughout the year that we know we have to do better on going forward, and it's just a huge learning curve, and it's not saying that we're going to come back next year and win All-Ireland by no means, but we would expect to be coming back with a stronger season next year.
There's a lot of other things that we wanted to ask you about, Niall. I guess one of the really interesting themes this year, once again, has been the role of the goalkeeper. It's something we spoke about with you at the end of last season, because your role is so significant in scoring for Tyrone to get them over the line in the key games in the All-Ireland series. This year felt like the conversation went to a whole other level. I'm not sure how much of it you were consuming, but certainly from Rory Beggan's point from play early in the league against yourselves, actually, wasn't it, on the first weekend of the league, and obviously Ethan Rafferty a couple of weeks ago getting 2 from play against yourselves in that game as well. So that conversation has been happening on one level, and then on the other end you have questions about goalkeepers being caught off their line, and obviously Mayo scored a long range goal themselves the other day. That conversation, I presume you're very much in favour of the roving goalkeeper role, and that people, the detractors of that role, possibly need to take a deeper look. Am I oversimplifying your opinion on that?
No, I think you've basically got it spot on. I think the important thing is the timing of when you do it, and the goalkeeper themselves, if they're capable of doing it. My biggest worry was, I spoke to a couple of other goalkeepers about it whenever we started playing that way, was that club managers would just start telling the goalkeeper that we expect you to play like Niall's playing or Rory's playing or Ethan now, and even Eoin Lynch is doing the same. And it's like we've all had experience of playing outfield, maybe not so much for Rory, but he's been playing that role for Scottstown for years. And I think the important thing is that you're not getting caught, obviously, but it's the timing of the game whenever you go. And like, I know Mayo got their long range goal yesterday, but the game was up, and Aaron O'Neill was just trying to help out his team by getting forward and being an extra body. And yes, he was caught, but I don't think it really affected the result. I think the result was only going one way at that stage anyway. And like, what do you see as standing your goal at that stage of the game? And Mayo having an extra man back. So I think it's all about timing and what you get involved in and why you get involved in it. But if you're being detrimental to the play or slowing things down, I don't think it's of any benefit. Whereas if you look at the way Ethan played against us, he was, breaking tackles and carrying the ball out of defence, and like, we're no stranger to Ethan playing midfield against us like in years gone by. So he's got more than enough of ability. But we just need to make sure that the goalkeeping skills are still being kept, and we don't lose track of the main job that we have at hand.
And now I know it's very early since you have been knocked out, but do you have any summer plans? It's probably earlier than even normal with the schedule being pushed so far forward. So obviously you're back into club, but do you have any plans now? What are you doing with yourself? You probably don't know what you're at with not having county training.
Well, just straight back into club, and you're still out of the house training 2 or 3 times a week, and your matches at the weekend. And I have a holiday booked now for August, but we were going that anyway because the county season would have been over. And whenever school finishes, it'll just be family time and golf. So there's silver linings everywhere you look.
Just a couple of other questions, Niall. First of all, who's more likely to make it to an All-Ireland final, Derry or Armagh? You've seen them both.
You can't be putting me on the spot like that. I think it would be, with no disrespect to Clare, I think Derry will be looking to be beating them, and Armagh Galway will be a real tight game. I'm not sure who'll come out of it, and Clare had a serious upset with Roscommon there, so they'll maybe fancy a chance at Derry as well. And it was definitely an interesting draw. I like the way Armagh play. I think the kicking that they have and the work rate. I think it'll be more suited to Croke Park than sitting back. We tried that for a number of years with Tyrone, and Croke Park saps all the energy out of your system. I know it's not that much bigger than many pitches, but just the stadium in general seems to just sap your energy, and it's hard to play that game where you're getting forward and you're getting back every attack and every time the other team get the ball. So it'll be interesting to see how Derry cope with that. But it's nearly another silver lining for me personally to see how well Armagh and Derry have performed in the games after they beat us, because I was sort of worried that it would be a one-off game and it would look really bad on us, but they've showed that they're two good sides, and Derry going on to beat Monaghan and then Donegal, it has to be one of the best Ulster title wins in long many a time. So it would be tough to see another Ulster team going on and get the final or even win it. But I would much prefer to see Sam Maguire coming up the country than going anywhere else.
That's interesting on Derry, that at that point about, I guess, Croke Park being a completely different universe to some of the other grounds for a multitude of different reasons. Do you think that if Derry are going to go all the way, that they need to tweak the game plan slightly in order to get over the line in some of those big games?
It's going to be hard because, say, we played that way with Tyrone for a number of years.
Yeah.
When we got to Croke Park, Dublin and Kerry always seemed to find their way around it, and even Mayo as well whenever we came up against them. So Dublin, Kerry, Mayo are no strangers to playing against packed defences and being patient and working their way around it. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes against one of them teams should they get to play them. I know now they're at the other side of the draw, so the only time they'll get them is in a final, and as everybody knows, in a final anything can happen, and Derry will maybe see it as a one-off chance to really go for broke. And against us, everybody thought that we would eventually outdo them, and they ran away with our game. Everybody thought Monaghan would eventually outdo them. They done the same, and everybody thought that Donegal would outdo them, and they done the same to them. So, look, it's going to be an interesting end of the championship, put it like that. And I don't know how much of it I'll be able to watch and stomach, but it's great to see Ulster teams still down at the top table, regardless of whether it's us or not.
Just one last question for me anyway, Niall, just on the other side of the draw. It kind of feels to me, maybe I'm stretching this, but it kind of feels to me as if Mayo were in a relatively similar position to you guys last year, where they took a bit of a hockeying off Kerry in the league, and now they go into a knockout game in Croke Park against Kerry in the championship, with Kerry maybe coming in off a relatively straightforward Munster title. What can they learn from what you did to them last year in order to overturn that result and get a big win and get themselves into the semi-final?
It's hard to probably point a finger exactly at what they can do, like, but it's like we sort of always say that the team that works hardest is going to win, like, and it can be as simple as that. And we felt like last year we outworked every team, and this year we didn't have the work done ourselves to be able to do that, and we were outworked by Derry and we were outworked by Armagh, and that's why they beat us. Because at county level, everybody's got the basic skills. It's just who's willing to really go that extra mile. And for Mayo to beat Kerry, they're going to have to do that, because like this Kerry team, 1 to 15, is definitely the best team in the country. Like, and they were the best team in the country last year, but we outworked them. And it's whether they're willing to go to the well or not to get over the line. And that's the biggest question mark, I suppose, that sits over Kerry at the minute, is whether they're willing to go that extra mile to get the All-Ireland.
And now, do you think coming through the Ulster Championship or the provincial that it's an advantage? Like, I remember last year seeing you against Kerry, I thought that was something you really had on them, that you had those tough games, and then when it came down to it, you really could push on. You had that experience in the prior games when I don't think Kerry really had that. Is that something that, whatever happens with Kerry, Mayo and with Derry, and say it is Derry, Armagh, you know, do they have an upper hand in that way, that they've had these really tough games? You know, they have to, you know, really fight for each result they've got, when Kerry haven't really been tested. It remains to be seen, obviously, what happens now with Mayo. I'm sure there's going to be a lot different, but, you know, they haven't really had too many tough games.
It can work for and against. I think, like, we always said it was hard whenever you were coming out of Ulster. Like Derry, for example, have beat us, Monaghan, Donegal, and one slip up and they're gone. Like, whereas, like, Kerry haven't got out of second gear, like, and they're now in an All-Ireland quarter-final, and I suppose it's frustrating for the likes of us having to always, you know, be at the top of your game, or you're knocked out. You have no chance of winning the provincial, and I think that's where maybe the provincials are losing a wee bit of heart, like, because even Dublin as well, you know, they cantered the how many Leinsters in a row now, and it's crazy to think that they can work hard for the league and basically take 5 or 6 weeks. Like I was saying, we couldn't get a catch-up period, whereas like Dublin, Mayo can train really hard for 5 or 6 weeks in preparation for an All-Ireland quarter-final. So it can be advantageous in terms of they should have the work done, but it's whether they have, as you say, been through them tough times together, and whether they know the person beside them is really going to dig into them or not.
Niall, it's been great chatting to you. Thanks a million for being so generous with your time. Best of luck with the season with Eden Dork and with the golf game as well. Try and enjoy the summer as much as you can.
Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
Cheers. Niall Morgan there on the line, of course. Tyrone All-Star, All-Ireland winning goalkeeper. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Let's just tell you what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio throughout the day. From 1 o'clock, we've got OTB Gold, which is Wexford 1956 with Ned Wheeler and Art Foley. The Dadcast coming your way at 3 o'clock, and then a Michael Owen career retrospective from 4 o'clock. Joe in conversation with Ruby Walsh then from 6, and Off the Ball live on your radio as ever from 7 o'clock tonight. You can follow Off the Ball across all our social channels. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can download the OTB Sports app for the latest and best in sports content and analysis. We are back after these with Phil Egan live in studio, looking ahead to tonight's Ireland's match. But before that, we'll have a look at Leinster's possible complacency, and that was discussed on Monday Night Rugby last night.
The first person to use the word, albeit to say I don't think it was complacency, but the first person to use the word was Leo Cullen. And in denying it, it was like, it was clearly there in his head that he brought the word up. He also said he'd have to look at himself. And I think that, you know, they were 20-point underdogs. They were 14-1 on to win the game. 40-1 on to win the game. You could have backed the Bulls at 14-1 to win the game. So what supports your theory that the Leinster supporters were very expectant of them being in the final. Whether the players were or not, I did find it curious, and who am I to criticise or question the great brains trust of Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster, Felipe Contepomi at all. But if Johnny Sexton is fit to be on the bench, surely he's fit to start. You've got Leinster's greatest out half of all time. This is your second last season. You get to use him. Like, why wouldn't you start him? I'm reliably informed Hugo Keenan was 24th man, and he could be seen running the full training session on the previous day, on the Thursday, in the captain's run. Again, why wouldn't you start him? And what kind of message maybe does this send to the players, even at a subliminal level? We can get by with Johnny on the bench here. There is almost a hidden message in this that, you know, we're not going full bar, we're not going full tilt at this.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been a contributory factor as well. So when Leo Cullen talks about complacent, maybe he did say, you know, he would have to look at himself and all of this as well. I think the other thing for me, Joe, just being at the game and watching it, I felt really concerned for Leinster's chances from the very first time they went deep inside the 22 and the way that the Stormers repelled them. I didn't do the tally on how many times each side went into the opposite 22, and I'm not surprised by the utter lack of imagination in the Bulls game, in the way they played. I think, you know, Leinster scored 2 wonderful tries, and Leinster are far more enterprising, enjoyable brand of rugby to watch play than much of South African rugby. We saw when there was that clash of identical styles in the Lions tour, it was almost a crime against the sport. And you know, but I do think that when it came to the one-off power game, and then they scored their try and very cleverly worked switch off a tap penalty, but that they actually their power game inside the 22 ultimately was the distance, both in converting chances into 7 points, be it the penalty try from the line of maul, but also in repelling Leinster quite a lot of times. Leinster scored more tries, had more possession, had more territory, passed the ball more, played more rugby, but unfortunately lost because they just, curiously, they weren't quite at it, and they were all they freely admitted that themselves. And you know, you get used to winning a tournament and maybe winning the first game against the Bulls 31-3, maybe running up those 76 points against the Scarlets a week previously did them no favours either, Joe. It often doesn't.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Hurling Pod on OTB Sports.
Do they actually want to win the Leinster? I look at the way Kilkenny celebrate. I look at the way Limerick celebrates their Munster, right? Do Galway actually want to win the Leinster? You know, or were they treating it as just another game, another stepping stone? That's a question I have.
Join myself, Will O'Callaghan, along with James Skehill and Paul Murphy for the best insight this hurling season. Subscribe to the GA podcast feed on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
17 minutes past 9, you're very welcome back. It is a big day for the Republic of Ireland football because you've got the Under-21s in action at 4:30 and of course the seniors in action at 7:45 tonight against Ukraine. It is against Italy at 4:30 in Ascoli that the Under-21s have qualification on the line. Phil Egan is with us in studio. Phil, how are you getting on?
Very well, yeah, looking forward to a big day for Irish football. I also have the European draws coming up at 11.
That's right.
Shamrock Rovers and Derry are in there as well, and Sligo Pats will be tomorrow. But yeah, like the prize on offer for the 21s is huge. And you think back to when they lost to Italy earlier in the campaign, they'd obviously been beaten in Montenegro, they'd dropped points in Luxembourg, and it didn't look great. But that injury time winner that Ollie O'Neill scored against Sweden, like, who knew at the time that it was such a big goal? It was celebrated, obviously, because when you score an injury time, it's always a big deal, an injury time winner. But how crucial it turned out to be. And then off the back of that, we went to Sweden and won and have got ourselves right back into it. And here we are with a chance to qualify for a first ever Under-21 tournament. And even if we don't get the job done today, you know, there is the playoff to fall back onto. So a nice position to be into for Jim Crawford.
It feels that like it's probably just a form thing and a momentum thing, but it feels like the gap between these sides, between Ireland and Italy, is much smaller than the time it was at Tala.
Yeah, and it was an interesting interview Tyreek Wright did after the game the other night, where he basically was like, yeah, we can't wait for this. And that's what you want to hear from young players, that they're going to relish the challenge. Now, I'm not saying that Ireland have to go out with a need to win the game from the off, because you can't win a game in the first 20 minutes. You can certainly lose it. And I actually mentioned the Montenegro game. That's a game that we lost in the first 10 minutes, where they conceded twice inside the opening 10 minutes and never recovered, pulled the goal back, but it was done. So I think it'll definitely be a day for patience. And don't forget as well, Italy had their chance to qualify against Sweden and they blew it. I know they did us a favour by taking Sweden out of the equation, but the longer the game goes on, maybe the more twitchy Italy get, where we know that any win will do. Obviously, they only need a draw, but they could find themselves in a position at the end of the game going, we had 2 chances to qualify automatically and we've blown them. So I think it'll definitely be a fairly cautious approach, and then let's see how it goes. I mean, say if Italy were to score, then obviously that changes how we have to go about it, but don't concede an early goal is what I'm imploring the team not to do.
It's kind of been spoken about so much, just the unbelievable array of talent that they don't even have at their disposal during this campaign. I guess the flip side of that is the talent that they do have, and I mean, maybe if they don't qualify for the championships, this isn't even a conversation, but if they do, you'd like to think that maybe the likes of Evan Ferguson and Will Smallbone stay in the squad for a little while longer, and actually playing in a big tournament could be better than the senior call-up that seems imminent for both of those men.
Yeah, and I wonder as well, some of the players that are currently away with Stephen Kenny's squad that are eligible to play, would Stephen Kenny and Jim Crawford have a sit down and think, do you know what, a tournament would be exactly what this player needs? Now, I'm trying not to get ahead of ourselves, because going to Italy and winning is a very tough task. So if it doesn't happen today, then it depends on who Ireland get in the playoffs. But you mentioned the form, the fact that they've won 4 games in a row, they definitely will be confident that they can get the required result today. But I think what we've seen, and obviously when Stephen Kenny was in charge of the Under-21 team, there was a real buzz about the team because we saw some of the players. You think, obviously Sweden were in the last campaign as well, and we went away there and we put in an unbelievable performance. But we have also seen, as good as the talent that we have coming through, and we have good young players in our senior squad, how hard it is to transition from under-21 level to senior level. And it's more a case of what's happened at club level for these players. You think of that really exciting Stephen Kenny under-21 team. We've Troy Parrott, Adam Eade, Aaron Connolly. Those 3 players now, look at what has happened since they made the step up to the senior squad. Connolly's had to get a move away, a loan move. Obviously Troy Parrott's had a couple of loan moves. And Adam Eade, just as it looked like he was starting to get a foothold in the Norwich team in the Premier League, he picked up that unfortunate injury. But that's how difficult it is. All these talented young players we have, can they get the sufficient game time at the highest level, at club level? At the moment, it suggests the answer would be no. So it's a tough one, and you kind of see it spills into the senior team. You look at the players that we have playing tonight in Ukraine against Ukraine, that players are playing League One, Championship. Some of them aren't even getting into their team, and that's why it can be very hard to pull out consistent performances.
Yeah, I feel the timing of that needs to be right, going from the 21s up to the senior squad. And it's a question that's been asked to Stephen Kenny in quite a few of the press conferences that I've been at, especially about Will Smallbone. If he's going to feature, will he be called up? And he didn't say no. He just said, we'll see how he gets on against the Italy team. How he goes against that, and then we'll see from there. So it wasn't a straight out no. There's definitely a maybe in there. But yeah, I'm not sure. Is that what's right for him?
Well, see, Will Smallbone was getting some first team football with Southampton in the Premier League now, albeit he likes to play in a more central role. He was being played out on the right hand side under Ralph Hasenhüttl, but then he picked up that knee injury, so he is only just coming back. But yeah, it is, everyone just assumed when Stephen Kenny took over the senior job that he could just bring all these young players with him, but it's just not that easy. Like, you have to have a certain aspect to your game to be able to cope at senior level in international football. And it wasn't a case that Stephen Kenny could just say to some of the more senior pros that, thanks very much, good luck. And now I've got a young crop coming through. I'm just going to use them because look who's going to captain the team tonight. It's going to be James McLean. Players like this, Shane Duffy, Seamus Coleman, these have all been important players to help the young players come through. So it's it's such a challenge to know when is the right time to put players in. In previous campaigns under previous managers, we had more established senior players playing at a higher level that you could just bring in one or two young players and they'd have so much experience around them that they'd be able to bed in a bit more comfortably, whereas now you're going to see it even tonight. We're going to have to make changes. Stephen Kenny's going to have to make a raft of changes. He made 5 on Saturday for the Scotland game, but actually all 5 proved to be masterstrokes in terms of who scored goals, who set up goals, who performed well, and he's going to have to do more of the same tonight, and that's the challenge. And I said some players, you can see like young players, the talent is there, but you don't always get the consistency.
So Kenny's been talking about 2 systems in the build-up to this game this week. Do you expect a reversion to the other system that we didn't see on Saturday tonight?
Yeah, like I think his hand will be forced in certain aspects of it. He's obviously going to stick with 3. Now, Nathan Collins has done so well. He's been one of the real bright sparks of this 10-day period where, you look at the first 2 games where there was such disappointment after losing in Armenia and losing to Ukraine, but Nathan Collins was a positive and he performed well again on Saturday. Then there's talk of Darragh Lenihan coming in. I wonder would he contemplate maybe playing Ryan Manning or Enda Stevens as part of a back 3? Because James McLean is going to play as the left wing back, so does he play a left-sided player on the left-hand side of that back 3? Then what does he do at right wing back? Alan Brown obviously scored. I wonder would he be tempted maybe to play Ogbene as a right wing back? The midfield, can Josh Cullen play 4 games in 10 days? It's a hell of an ask. I think he's so crucial for that role that he plays where he's the one that gets things going. If he's not there, do you put Malumbi in there? Has Jason Knight going to play in that role again? Jeff Hendrick was obviously left out for the game against Scotland. He came on. Conor Howrahan came on. I'm not sure I'm keen on the thoughts of, say, like a Malumbi and Howrahan, Hendrick midfield trio. I think when Ireland are at their best under Stephen Kenny, we have to play with energy, and that midfield wouldn't have as much energy in it for my liking.
Yeah, that's really do you see in a situation like this, and I mean the situation being that you've got a threadbare defence, that Kenny will eventually go back to a back 4 in case of emergency, and maybe even more than that as an actual method of getting a foothold in certain games?
Possibly, and he talked about it in the build-up, how you have to be able to adapt, but the 2 systems he mentioned both require a back 3, and Ukraine could go with a back 3 tonight. They differ as well. Sometimes they go 3-4-3.
They're missing a lot of players as well.
And look, a lot was made of the team they played last week where it was labelled the Ukraine B team. But looking at that team, so they had 4 Kiev players, Dynamo Kiev players who played in the Champions League. I was going to say this season, but it's now last season. A Dynamo Kiev team that were in the group stage with Benfica and Bayern and Barcelona. Jankov, who came on and scored the goal, albeit it was quite a fortunate goal, he was part of that Dynamo team. Then you've got players from Shakhtar, you've a Real Madrid goalkeeper. The only players in their starting 11 last week that didn't play European football last season was an Everton player, but he'd obviously come from Kiev, Mykolenko, and then a player from Dnipro. So all those players have experience of playing European football. We don't have that. Matt Doherty played Conference League. We don't have players that play European football, which is key. Obviously, it can be more similar to international football in terms of the way it's played. It's not like Premier League or Championship or League One. So whatever team Ukraine put out tonight, they're still going to be better than us. And Stephen Kenny is obviously getting hammered for what he said at the start of the campaign. It was like, we've got to be looking to win the group. He also did say, I could be realistic and say we're probably the 3rd best team in the group. behind Ukraine and Scotland, but he aimed high, and he seems to be getting punished for aiming too high now. But realistically, I think if a positive result tonight is avoiding defeat, in my eyes anyway.
And from an Irish perspective, that Obafemi, we're not sure. He's definitely not playing. Yeah, so like obviously the energy that he brought, the freshness, you know, he was just so enjoyable to watch, and he was just incredible. So we would have liked to seen him being able to get, you know, 2 consecutive performances, and just what he offered.
Big time. And you know, obviously all the talk was about the goal, but I was more impressed with the assist for Parrott, because that's something we hadn't really seen with his game, and you know, he's getting his regular game time with Swansea, his confidence is up. So if he's not playing tonight, then Stephen Kenny's got a problem. But he doesn't have a player that can do what Obafemi did on Saturday, where he could drop deep and pick a pass, and also has the hold-up play back to goal, and then the ability to smash one in from outside the box. Does he go to someone like Scott Hogan? Like, there's a lot to be said for having a specialised striker who's comfortable dropping back to goal, lay it off, and then getting back into the box. That is not Ogbene's game. Ogbene is all about running at you. He doesn't want to be playing with his back to goal. Troy Parrott doesn't necessarily want to be playing with his back to goal. So that's where it'll be interesting to see what team he goes with. But it would be a shame if Obafemi isn't playing. It sounded like he's not going to play, but we were doing our bulletins before the game on Saturday and basically saying John Egan isn't playing. So you can imagine my surprise when I saw the team sheet come out on Saturday. I was like, okay, I've just been telling everyone a lie for the last 24 hours. Apologies for that.
The baby is definitely due now at this point. I think we're not going to get stung twice over that one. I like your shout on Ogbene at right wing back, actually. That could be something that we see over the next little while.
Maybe we get to see Ebisele as well.
Absolutely. Phil, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Ashley, good stuff this morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Eoin.
OTB AM brought to you live each morning from Monday to Friday by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We're going to be back tomorrow morning from 7:30, where Johnny Ward's going to be with me in studio. We'll have all the reaction to tonight's game against Ukraine. We'll have Damien Delaney with us. We'll also have rugby chat with ex-Ireland international Gordon Darcy and much more besides. We're leaving you this morning with Dion Fanning of The Currency dissecting Ireland's display against Scotland at the weekend. See you tomorrow.
Very happy to say Dion Fanning from The Currency is in studio. Hello.
Hi Joe, how are you?
Very well. So the boom to bust cycle that is the Republic of Ireland football manager. Boom time now. We're all partying now, Dion.
Everyone partied.
Celtic Tigers roaring. Michael Obafemi is leading a parade through Dublin. He's injured for tomorrow's game, we're hearing, but it was an important win for Stephen Kenny. It was a very enjoyable performance. There's a sense that the referendum that happens after most Stephen Kenny games has now been shelved once again.
Yeah, it would be great to, move it from beyond the kind of boom and bust, and try and I don't think Stephen Kenny necessarily always helps himself with that and try and talk about it in terms of everything being a referendum, because when. And I noticed after the game on the Saturday, he comes out and starts again talking about this is what we're trying to do, or we're trying to build something. When you keep talking like that, people are going to keep asking questions about what are you trying to build, when they don't see any evidence of anything being built. So sometimes I think it will be wise for him to simply just... as Freud said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Like sometimes a win, just take the win. Don't try and imbue it with some symbolic kind of example, or just or put it in always putting in the context of a bigger framework. Because then when things go wrong, people are also going to go, hold on, where's this frame? What are we building towards here if we're going to watch this rubbish? But equally, I think we are he is trying to build towards something, and I do feel that I don't know. It is very hard not to kind of think, okay, let's go down the road of talk about these things again. I think it is. I think there's an inevitability about a team of Ireland's level swinging from boom to bust.
Sure.
And we can talk about the tactics, we can talk about having an extra man in midfield. We can talk about all these things. But there is also a reality about Irish teams forever that, you know, when there's been a crisis, when they're under pressure, not just Irish teams, but, you know, it is a characteristic of lots of teams who aren't great teams, that when they are under that kind of pressure, they find a response. And I would also say that I think Scotland were made for them.
Well, they were ripe for the picking.
Yeah.
On the floor, physically, emotionally, away from home.
Yeah.
You couldn't have dreamt of a better scenario. Hadn't realised how on the floor they were until we saw them actually pitch up. I was worried about the game in advance, and then you realised they're all like Andy Robertson. They're all empty.
Yeah, they were. And now again, a couple of the early chances go in, and it changes. And I think that is the thing about Ireland playing Scotland. They could play again next Saturday, and it could be 3-0, 2-0, 3-0 to Scotland. Or
not least if it's at Hampden, which it will be
Yeah.
eventually.
So they are a team that, and if you look at their record, even, you know, obviously they came second in their World Cup group, but again, they're in a group that seems very familiar. You know, they're in a group with Denmark, they beat Austria. They're, you know, we've got those kind of, their experience is very similar to ours. Like their Euro performance was pretty average. You know, you look at them then, you look at them against Ukraine, so this is a really average team. And now they've a couple of players, like Robertson being the standout one, that you would put into the bracket, which I think is always the thing that differentiates teams at international level, is just that one good player. And Robertson you would put down as that player because he's playing for Liverpool, but he looks, as you say, he looks spent right now.
He's played an extraordinary number of games, so he must just be on the floor tired. I mean, having a marvellous player to propel everything forward, we saw it for the first 10 minutes against Ukraine the other evening, when Jason Knight seemed to just be inspired for those 10-15 minutes and went out of the game somewhat. And then at the weekend, supported ably by, you know, a very good Malumbi performance, and Troy Parrott, that brilliant run and that brilliant finish. But Obafemi, what he did was really extraordinary. Akin to when Callum Robinson was scoring hat-tricks and scoring multiple goals, you look at Obafemi and you do think, well, this is absolutely wonderful. It's not a sustainable model. At the same time, we can't expect this of Obafemi on too regular basis, not least tomorrow when he's injured, but going forward generally. That's why you can't get too excited by what happened at the weekend. And if McGinn takes that chance on 26 minutes before Parrott's goal in 27 minutes, who knows how the game pans out. So it was a great occasion, and it's great for the manager, but I agree with you, I don't think this is, well, QED, everyone, look at us now.
No, but I think I think it's more to do with state of mind and perspective on it as well, because Obafemi is a player who should have a decent enough future at international level, because we're not talking about Premier League standard. We're not talking about Premier League standard for anybody. We're not talking about Champions League standard. Let's be more specific, like Champions League standard, top of the Premier League standard for anybody really here, including like all the way through, and including Stephen Kenny, if you like, who I think is the right man for the job. But he is the right man for the job for a number of reasons. He has a vision for it. He knows what he wants. I think what he wants is the right thing to want. But also because Ireland need to kind of accept that there is no, accept their own limitations, accept their own limitations in terms of what we're shopping for. Like, you know, to go out and say, let's get in, and like this is the thing. Whenever you say that, talk about Stephen Kenny, people say, well, there's better people out there. We could do this or we could do that. We've got a manager who understands Irish football, who understands what it's about, who is worth persevering with, but it is a manager of a level where he's going to make mistakes, you know, and he's going to make mistakes that are going to be harder for him to, are exposed in a way that the mistakes he made in previous jobs weren't exposed and weren't analysed and weren't dissected. And that must be a new experience. And you can see that sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It was quite striking, actually, looking at the Sunday papers on quite a few of the front pages yesterday morning. There was the quote from Stephen Kenny, "I know what I'm doing."
Yeah.
And so that is somebody who's aware of all the criticism. And microscopic looks at his decisions. Like, for instance, the point has been made that for the game yesterday, sorry, what day are we? Saturday, that he made the changes and he got the changes right. And that's true. But then there is the flip side of that coin, which is really, does that expose the extent to which he got those decisions wrong in the previous two games? David Connolly was in this show a couple of weeks ago saying, put in Obafemi now for the Armenia game and the Ukraine game. The finish to his season is excellent, and Callum Robinson's not playing any football. Put Obafemi in. And then things like Knight dropping into midfield, that extra man in midfield against the Scots working so well. And you think of that really, that Ukraine midfield full of craft and how exposed Cullen was next to Hendrick. And again, a lack of energy in there, which Malumbi provided at the weekend. So you like, this isn't Kenny's first month or two in the job. He knows all of these players. He knows the requirements. He knows the demands. You'd have to say in hindsight, yes, he rectified some mistakes, but there's a fair argument that there actually were mistakes against Ukraine and Armenia.
Yeah, of course there were. But he's not the only manager. Like we come away from Manchester City in the Champions League talking about Pep Guardiola's selection mistakes. I think, again, he's going to make mistakes. I think you're dealing with players who, not just because of their own limitations, but because of also the nature of international football, you can't be sure what you're going to get from players
in terms of the quality. In terms of the totally agree.
And the consistency of performance. Yeah. And you say pick Obafemi instead of Robinson, which looks like the right thing now, but we were talking about Robinson. Robinson was the hero until these matches are now. It's like, oh my God, we're stuck with.
No, absolutely right, and I think Robinson absolutely had enough credit in the bank to be picked against Armenia.
And I would have been arguing
at that point. You wonder though, after that game, the evidence there. Maybe Ukraine had a punt, but I mean, it really was a bit of a punt. It was questionable then.
But I would have been arguing. And like this is a rare example of admitting that with hindsight what I would have been arguing beforehand would have been wrong, but I would have been arguing the opposite of what David Connolly was saying, and saying forget about what they're doing at their clubs. The manager should be picking on the basis of what they've done for him, and I think that is one of, again, we need to get away in general, I think, from the idea of the let's see who's what, put it this way, we need to form the basis of our side on the basis of what they do at international level.
See, it's funny, it depends who I'm talking to. I either come across as very down on the team or very up on the team, so I'm sort of playing devil's advocate in touch with different people, because with Connolly yesterday, when he reiterated that point, I did say, but hang on, you did play in a team where Jason McAteer is picked when his club form at Blackburn is on the floor and he's been turfed out of there, and you saw what he did because Mick was loyal to him and he upped his game for Ireland. So you've seen that firsthand.
But how many times has that been described as a stroke of psychological genius from Mick McCarthy? He ensured the loyalty of those players, because at the first time when they encountered trouble at their clubs, Mick didn't go, you're out, son.
And Connolly accepted that and then just said, but I still sort of think you should have picked up Obafemi. So these are the intricacies of being an international manager where you can't win.
But they also come along. We don't know, but if he picked, now I think Malumbi was a key selection.
Yeah.
And there is a, and you have to Obafemi, the difference he made and the energy he brought and the level of skill he brought obviously make a difference. But I think there are so many unknowns with any Irish international team performance. Like, that is what Kenny, you want to get. You want him building towards something where you go, okay, we know what's going to happen. And he's, we know there's going to be some kind of degree of consistency of performance, and that is something that is going to take longer. And I think with the players we have, it's just something you almost have to kind of accept as well. Like, okay, there's going to be or else we are like I think this isn't a kind of blind defense of Stephen Kenny, but I think again you have to negotiate quite a fine line between saying this is what we should expect with the players we have and equally saying we can do something more with the players we have than we were led to believe when we didn't play any football. I think the most dispiriting thing about the Armenia and Ukraine performances was that sense that it sort of had knocked the feel good kind of factor out of Ireland again, which kind of also demonstrates that it's pretty brittle, that feel good factor.
Yeah,
because it's back. Like I was at my son's mini World Cup on Sunday morning, and again everyone was talking about Ireland, Scotland, and people who were there, were talking about what an incredible atmosphere it was. Everyone was buzzing off the back of the game on Saturday.
Yeah, and
it's just like, and that seemed gone. That seemed lost after the Ukraine game.
Yeah.
So it is a process where this is going to happen.
Sure. Like, there are certain things with what Kenny is trying to do which I think most people accept and give him a lot of rope. I'm talking about the 3 chances gifted to Scotland in the first 25, 26 minutes. We're trying to play a progressive brand of football. We have a certain calibre of player. They're going to be put under pressure. Things will go wrong. And you're hoping that over the course of a tenure, the effort to play progressive football there outweighs the sloppy goal or two. We're invariably going to concede, and it's going to be a bad moment, and that's going to happen. And that's what I'm willing to go with when it comes to Kenny, as opposed to what we were doing under previous management, which was just refusing to play football a lot. But I suppose what jumped out against Scotland, and where there's a real legitimate criticism of this team, the biggest difference against Scotland, the tactical innovation for sure, like the movement of Knight into midfield helped, and Malumbi's energy, but it's that energy. So I turned on the game. I was at the Ukraine game. I was at Croke Park on Saturday. I came home and I watched the game and I knew the result. But straight away what jumped out instantly in the first minute was the energy of Ireland without the ball, the aggression. I mean, think of Obafemi's third goal. It comes from aggression and it comes from pressure. And there is part of me that does wonder if there is... Because there are, there's a great story where Anthony Daly was picking the brain of Joe Schmidt, and Schmidt was asking him, well, different pre-match routines and things you do, and I think Daly had said that, well, on the bus I go through, and I don't want to misquote Anthony here, but this is my memory of it, the 10 things that we're really going to focus on in the game. And Joe Schmidt's sense was the 10 things. If you can get 2 of them to stick in their brain, good. And I think there is something in this Irish team where we're watching this big transition and they're very, very, very focused on keep possession, play here, they're in my shape. And I think at times they forget to be awful to play against. And we were awful to play against out of possession at the weekend. And for me, that has been a big complaint, a legitimate complaint under Kenny. And like Keith Andrews, brilliant, tenacious midfielder on his day. It was lovely to see Ireland really get after Scotland. And I don't think we, like against Ukraine, but that was a cake ride for Ukraine.
That was a what, sorry?
Cake ride. I mean, it was just Ukraine on the ball, had all the time they wanted. There was nobody getting into them.
But is that not like...
And I don't think that ever goes out of fashion. I don't think Keane smacking over Mars, I don't think Malumbi tackling players ever goes out of fashion.
But how often, like, that is again the boom and bust of Irish football that predates Stephen Kenny. Like, we like, if you look at Paris in 2009 versus the first leg. Everything about that. Now, there was, for whatever reason, there was a liberation. Okay, maybe it wasn't like but they were on the front foot in different ways. And that is, again, a function of teams who feel they've got nothing left to lose. And I think there was something about that Ireland team. Like, you're kind of, with your backs to the wall, you're kind of, right, okay, we've got to go out and fight now. And everything else then becomes kind of secondary to this kind of, we've got to do that. And I think, like Terry Venables used to say, it's a bit like the Joe Smith, Terry Venables used to say, the last thing you tell them is the first thing they forget.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And I think that happened, like, that stuff is, again, it's hardwired into Irish footballers. And when it's required, and when it's like, okay, you can imagine what it was like on Saturday after the week they'd had. It's like, go out there and put your mark on it.
Yeah.
and they do that straight away, and then that everything else follows from it.
Yeah, I take that point, but they still tried to play football. I mean, they still gave the ball away, playing out from the back 3 times. They still stuck to the Kenny principles. It wasn't, we're hoofing everything forward, we're getting them turned, and we're going to put them under physical pressure. They still stuck to the principles, but crucially, there was more energy about it. And like you're saying, when it's backs to the wall, I accept that. Are their backs to the wall? Their backs are pretty much against the wall in Poland, I would think, against this Ukraine side. There should be the same fight there.
Yeah, you would like to think so, but I think that's what I mean. I think there is a psychological element that makes it, on those nights, in those situations, it makes that fight, makes it easier to bring it to the surface.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's an emotional state.
Yeah, and I think when it's sort of, you go into Armenia after however many months it was without a game, and it's like, okay, here we are in June playing the Nations League. And you start off badly and you start off slowly, and the game just lacks anything. Like nobody, I feel sorry for analysts and people who have to go through and watch that match again. You know what I mean? Like nobody ever wants to watch that match again.
Yeah.
And again, and that's also an interesting thing about the last, those 2 games, which was slightly different from other Stephen Kenny games where they've been enjoyable to watch no matter what was happening.
Yeah.
They weren't. But I think that energy, again, you want that as a given. But I think they're a group of players where that's going to ebb and flow as well.
Because they're just human beings, or because they're bad pros?
Are they the only? They're the only two options.
No.
No, I think because that's just reality. I think it happens for lots of teams. I think it's probably more difficult in international football to maintain it when you have those gaps, when you have... I think it was a surprise it didn't happen against Ukraine after Armenia. I think that's probably what surprised people a little bit.
That was the worrying one for me.
Yeah.
Armenia didn't worry me because at times, low block, men behind the ball, it's a low-scoring sport. It just happens. We see it happen all the time. That was frustrating. But Ukraine was the worrying one, which is why this Scottish performance is so welcoming. I think after that Ukraine result, more so the performance, there was an air of wondering, is this actually getting a bit sticky now?
Yeah.
Did you not think?
I did. But again, that's sort of... I did something with you guys on the morning after it, and we were talking about it, and I was like, okay, let's just stick with... I was sort of... I didn't... it's funny how the media... Not blamed, but how things accelerate into, right, let's now have a conversation about Stephen Kenny again.
Sure.
It's not, it doesn't necessarily have to be the conversation. And again, that's also a function, like we don't have a huge amount. We've talked about this before, there isn't a huge amount to talk about. There isn't a huge amount that people find that are like, it's not, is Roy Keane going to show up today? You know what I mean? It's not, has Roy Keane gone home? It's not, it will, like Robbie Keane is, it's not, we don't have those personalities that, that really capture people's attention. So I think there's something just, we're drawn sometimes to talking about the manager and that, and okay, after 2 defeats like that, that's going to happen. But I was kind of slightly surprised that we kind of got there again. No, again, I don't think...
Did we get there, though? Like, who was... I didn't hear anybody say, well, this puts Stephen Kenny on the back foot. I mean, he needs to... His position is up for discussion again. Who was saying that?
It was some of the papers on... Some of the papers on Saturday before the Scotland game were saying it's... that the members of some members of the board were concerned about the way it was going.
But I think it was concern, not a good state to be in after. That's concern. That's nicely between boom and bust.
I might be wrong, but I'm sure there were sort of, if they lose these 2 games, if they'd lost Scotland and in Poland against Ukraine, if they lost those 2 games, there would be questions.
It wouldn't have been good.
No, it wouldn't have been good, and maybe they're right to have that conversation. But what I'm saying is there aren't, like, we can talk about Obafemi, Robinson, all these kind of things, but how it's not Sexton versus O'Gara or something. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't capture the imagination.
Sure.
The way some of the great sporting debates do, because the players are, all trying their best and all, but it's not even like pick Wes Houlihan, pick Andy Reid. It's not even that level. The players are being there. So like this is what everything funnels towards any result just turning into a kind of referendum on the manager. Now, as I said, I don't think a manager helps himself clearly with decisions he makes at times, and also with trying to frame everything as a kind of either a demonstration of how well they're building towards something, because that is creating a hostage to fortune for the times when that doesn't happen. But it is kind of, I think it is where what we have to kind of stick to.
Yeah. So what's result or performance tomorrow which falls within the parameters of, that's who we are. That's about what we can hope for.
It's 1-1, isn't it?
No, but actually, to your point, I think Ireland can lose tomorrow and it's no great disgrace or not a particularly worrying issue if it's in the right way.
Yeah.
Like away from home, sort of neutral venue, but away from home, and presumably a lot of the Ukraine frontliners will come back, and their B team wasn't half bad.
Yeah.
So Ireland without Obafemi, you could see 2-0, and that shouldn't lead to.
No, but I could also see Ireland playing. I think a team at home attacking Ireland, giving them some chance to get behind them. I think you could see it's a game that's a bit more suited to that spirited.
Oh my God, you're setting us up to fail here now.
Well, I'm setting us up for a 1-1. I'm talking up a 1-1. I'm just as I'm saying this, I'm just picturing a glorious 1-1,
which wouldn't be dreadful. So I suppose the other thing which happens with this team as well, quite a bit, is now, we found the solution. It's Obafemi up front. It's a third man in midfield. We've cracked the code. And that's always misguided as well. We'll play different types of opposition. We're going to have injuries. There'll be different demands. I mean, this now shouldn't be necessarily the way Ireland set up, no matter what, until we reach another point in the road where the pressure's on and we have to pull something out of the hat. I've no problem if Stephen Kenny mixes and matches and changes personnel and doesn't necessarily have three in midfield against different opposition.
Yeah, I think three in midfield does make sense. Does make sense, but I also think who the three are. I think Malumbi coming in for Hendrick, did make
huge difference.
Huge difference.
Now, when Ireland do have the ball, Malumbi doesn't really get forward in the way that Knight does. So it was almost asymmetrical at times. There was a real overload on the left hand side, and McLean was full of energy and verve as well, and a bit of quality as well, whereas Malumbi tends to sit. But I think given what he contributes in terms of energy, that's probably a price worth paying, because Hendrick's had a good year for Ireland. I mean, he's so often dismissed, and even in the past week at times he looked the most likely to play a telling pass to unlock a defence. But I suppose I don't know if he gives you.
Well, if you're talking about that energy, and you're talking about that setting it. Well, again, maybe that's the debate we should be having. Maybe it should be maybe the O'Gara versus Sexton.
Hendrick or Malumbi.
Hendrick versus Malumbi.
We'll put it in the headline and see how many views it gets. How about that? But there is that issue with Hendrick where there's there is the nagging sense of a player in there.
And well, he's always been a really elegant player who's capable of doing, creative things, but it is accompanied by a sense, and I don't think it's correct in terms of what he is doing, but it's correct. He has he gives a sense of casualness, I think, that makes it very easy for people, including myself, to be critical of him. I don't, it's not how he is, but he has that air, which is probably why he's able to do the creative things that he does. But I think when you have that on one side, and then you have Malumbi bringing you that energy and that bite, and what you go for maybe again is
opposition dependent.
Probably.
Yeah, I think so too.
But then you talk about McLean. Like McLean had one of his best ever games for Ireland. Like that, and so things like that. Like
95 caps in, we found the answer.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's it, or 93 or whatever. And how many people felt this is like James McLean is going to be the solution? How many people's hearts sank when they saw the team and like, okay, how many of these people like we would see like this is just, where's the future?
Yeah,
Well,
I've heard through the grapevine that he really surprised management.
Right.
They probably went in along similar lines to your line of thinking there, and then this guy's, in terms of his application, quality, fitness, bit of speed, you name it.
But so like this, that again comes back to this idea of like it being, again, it's not just. I don't want to say that that is a function of just the Ireland team or the level they're at, because it's you can go through all sorts of lots of teams where the same thing happens, but nobody would have said, okay, let's pick that team, and you're actually going to get. You know what you're going to get in terms of work rate and approach and attitude, but actually for so much of the good attacking stuff to be coming from McLean as well, I don't think it's unfair to say that surprised people. I think to the level that it happened on Saturday, and it was great. And as I said, it was really is up there with one of his best performances.
He's a lot of quality. Can we finish on a very positive note?
Okay.
This kid Troy Parrott is having this lovely knack of being able to score goals at a young age at international level, and really high quality goals. So if his last two are the Lithuania winner and then the goal that Obafemi set up, and his run, the quality of his run has been underestimated vastly. It was a great pass and well executed pass on Obafemi's part, but I mean the run created the whole scenario and he just finished so calmly. I mean this is I know he hasn't exploded at Spurs, but this is very promising now.
It is, and it's great because, like, you think of the pressure that's been on Troy Parrott to be the next big thing, to be that player, and everything again. We talk about people being scrutinised, like that scrutiny to be under, and it took some time with that pressure to see that, and maybe the fact that the spotlight has gone in slightly different directions, and he's come into the team under the radar a little bit, not with that same level of expectation, and now he's doing it, is great for him, and it is exciting. And I don't think, again, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, I don't care, from an Ireland point of view, it doesn't matter what happens to him at club level. Like, this is just get this player out there and keep him. And I think Stephen Kenny is the ideal man. I think Stephen Kenny will understand him, will know how to get the best out of him. And again, it may not be every game, but he is a player. That run was exceptional.
Exceptional.
It really was. It really was exceptional.
And
it was a thing of beauty, the whole thing, and the ball, obviously. But then for that run, and then to be able to, just to not even have to break his stride for any of that, just continue with the celebration. It was one of those, it was just a thrilling moment. It was as thrilling, if not more thrilling, even than the Obafemi goal.
I agree with you, yeah. In some ways, it's more heartening, it's more repeatable.
Yeah. It'll never happen again.
So, Ireland to win comfortably in Poland, and we'll discuss over the next couple of days. Dion Fanning from The Currency, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
OTB.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast? If you had to pick a greatest British football